Hey, good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024. It's 7:30 p.m. and we're here tonight for a special meeting. We're going to call this meeting to order. We're going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please, Michelle.
Councilmember Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Binkowski.
Here.
Mayor Milan.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Moffitt.
Present.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Here.
Thank you. I'd like to call for approval of the agenda.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Support. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Binkowski.
Yes.
Mayor Milan.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Moffitt. Yes. Councilmember Shepherd.
Yes.
Great, we've approved our agenda. We will move on to public comments for items on the agenda. If anyone here would like to speak to items on the agenda, we will welcome you to the middle of the floor. But since no one's moving, we're going to bypass that and go on to new business. First item we have is consideration of the Compensation Commission determination.
Yes, I move we approve the Compensation Commission's determination recommendations as presented.
Support.
Any comments? Okay, roll call please, Michelle. Oh, sorry.
I was actually curious what a state and national meeting were. Resolved that the mayor and council persons have received a sum of $100 per diem for each state and national meeting attended. I was wondering if you could provide an example of what a state and national meeting is.
MMSDC. Oh wait, no, sorry, I'm going to my other job. MML, yeah. Go to
Is
my
MML considered as a state meeting?
MME is me, MML is you.
Yeah.
What's that?
SEMCOG, any other regional.
Okay. A regional ones or?
It doesn't state that in there, so
Okay.
disregard that.
All right.
Barring that, roll call please.
Councilmember Binkowski.
No.
Mayor Milan.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Moffitt.
Yes.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Okay, that passes. We will accept the new determination from the Compensation Commission. We'll move on to item 6B, which is consideration of the submission of the City of Clawson draft fiscal year 2024-2025 budget. Can I get a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move to receive and file the submitted City of Clawson draft fiscal year 2024-2025 budget.
Support.
Do we have any questions or concerns for our city manager, or would our city manager like to give them a synopsis?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Per City Charter Section 6.07 Annual Budget Preparation Contents, quote, in April of each year, the city manager or city manager designee, in the absence of the city manager, shall submit to the council a budget of all income and expenditures of the city for the ensuing year. This year, the administration council approached the budgeting season in a much more proactive, collaborative, and inclusive manner. Discussions around goals and objectives began as early as January and were on the meeting's agendas for the 8th time when they were finally approved. Additionally, and equally significant, was the hosting of 2 budget discussion meetings in February between city administration department heads and the city council. On April 2nd, 2024, on the April 2nd, 2024 City Council agenda, there was a discussion on the financial impacts from the fiscal year 24-25 budget discussions held between the administration and City Council. The supporting document for that agenda item was the, quote, draft budget presentation and analysis memo from Finance Director Mark Pollack. There was not a comment or question from council on that agenda item. For this evening, an overview of the budget by fund will be presented for the general public's awareness. Council is encouraged to ask questions throughout the brief. Currently, budget workshops are scheduled for Thursday, April 25th at 7 p.m. and Tuesday, April 30th at 7 p.m. Once the council is comfortable with the budget, any remaining budget workshops can be canceled. Per City Charter Section 6.08, Annual Appropriations Resolution, Tax Levy Limitation, quote, in May of each year, the council shall pass an annual appropriation resolution which shall be based on the budget submitted by the manager as approved or amended by the council. That date for this year is May 7th, 2024. I'll turn it over to Finance Director Powell.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I submitted a little bit different than years past, but I submitted a narrative summary of each of our funds, departments. From what we originally submitted, there is a larger deficit. Part of that is due to, I actually have the tax numbers, the rollbacks, and there is a little bit more in DDA capture than I had originally anticipated as well, but overall their revenue is about the same for capture. But we went from about a $210,000 from April 2nd use of fund balance to about a $338,000 use of fund balance. One of the things I mentioned in the narrative is I expect we'll end up somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000 surplus this budget year. We'll have some more amendments before you in June to address any additional required budget amendments. But I feel like we'll end up somewhere close to where we estimated back when we did the last budget amendments, which would be somewhere in that $400,000 to $500,000 surplus range. Obviously, this proposed budget would take a chunk of that as well if everything is approved. But I figured I'd go through. I'm certainly not going to read the narrative, but I'll go through and hit some of the highlights, starting with general fund revenues. We expect to be about $10,014,960 in estimated revenues this year. It's about a 1.4% increase in our total amended budget revenues from last budget year. As usual, our revenue source, largest revenue source, tends to be from property taxes, which will be about 62.8% of the total this year. As our housing values continue to rise above the rate of inflation, we do have the two factors that reduce the rates so that homeowners don't have the impact beyond inflation. Our CPI was about 5.1% that we utilized, and our overall increase in property tax revenue is somewhere in that 3.5% to 4% range due to the Headley rollback. But the reduction fraction was 98.44% for our millage rates. All the millage rates will be on the May 7th meeting for council's approval, but overall we'll go from 12.8515 mils for our general operating down to 12.6509 for 2024. Our state share revenue is not changing much. We have a slight increase in the constitutional and statutory portion, so we have about a 1.4% increase in that. We're budgeting about $1,448,160 in the upcoming year. Again, some of the highlights that we have in there is we did have larger than normal revenues from our building department. We've had a very active permitting process for some of the larger projects. We did have two large projects that hit the budget over the last couple of years, which were the high-rise and the ACE property. And we do expect to have generally higher than normal revenues in those areas as well. And we do, of that revenue we take in, we distribute 75% back to our inspectors. So we end up with about a net 25% revenue on those. With the new RecPro software in our Parks and Rec department, we expect to see some increase because we think there'll be an ease of use for our residents and even non-residents for our rec programs. Scott is very familiar with the program and feels like it'll give people a little better opportunity for some of our programs. Our admin charges are about just under $600,000, and really what that is we charge our other funds for non-direct charges from individuals assigned to each department. So we charge back those funds to the general fund for their services. And the recovery zone payment, I think, was in two places before. It was offsetting itself, but we left that strictly in the DDA. Now it's debt that's paid by the DDA. So rather than having to transfer in and out in both places, we just now have that recorded in the DDA. Let's see, next year our cable franchise fees, I expect that they will continue to drop because less and less people are watching cable now. They're cutting the cord. And we get a portion of those franchise revenues, so I expect that to drop some. So most of the other items are around or near normal in our general fund revenues. Any questions on revenues from anybody specifically?
The admin charges, those apply to other funds such as the library and I think a few others, right?
Yeah, water and sewer. We do have, the majority of them come from water and sewer, and there's some from the library. We do not charge major and local streets. Actually do a little bit. But most other funds that are non-general funds that have other workers doing things, we charge.
Okay.
And we do it by percentage with the auditors kind of analyzing, making sure we're not overcharging anyone or undercharging anyone.
I have another question. There's about, what, 6.3 million is estimated revenue due to property tax. What percentage of that is residences and what percent roughly is businesses?
I would have to, I would have to estimate. We don't have a lot of commercial base. I would guess that our residential is probably 85% of that.
Okay.
We don't have a lot of commercial base. And then with a lot of the properties being in the DDA, the capture right now takes some of that from the general fund as well and reinvest it into downtown. But we don't have a huge commercial base.
Right.
But I can definitely get you the numbers where we're at in residential versus commercial.
Yeah.
But
I know we're primarily a bedroom community, right? So
Right.
I was just kind of curious what that breakdown. So you're saying just shooting out of the gate, roughly 85 to 15.
yeah.
Okay.
You say that housing values continue to rise at a rate well above inflation. What is that rate?
It was about 8.7% residential values.
For housing?
Yes.
What's, have we seen that in the past, or is this a new level that we reached?
The last 2 years was in excess of 8. Prior to that, I think like 6.5. So the last 3 years has seen a trend above inflation. We did have a high inflation rate a couple years ago, but that's part. Headley has the rollback fraction, and then you also have Proposal A, which keeps individual residents 5% or lower. If you've owned the home for a number of years, you get a capped rate. Even if you don't, even if it's your first year owning it, you're capped at 5% increase.
Do we know how we trend compared to the other surrounding communities?
Actually, our millage reduction fraction was higher than most. I think Ferndale and one other community were the only ones that had a higher reduction fraction. And it's really just the formula. You have additions and subtractions that come off. We're close to our suburban counterparts as far as increases in home values. You know, I think we're within 1% or 2% of everybody in the area, so we're pretty close.
I just wanted to point out, someone informed me that we're not live streaming on YouTube.
We are now.
We are now?
Yes.
Okay.
I apologize.
All right.
Any other questions, revenue? All right. And then as far as the expenditure departments, again, I won't read it, but some of the highlights that we have in here is for city council, we have, obviously we have our council with the approved proposal issuing a check. Rather than tracking meetings, I think the discussion, and in fact, I think it was Michelle's idea, the recommendation to our compensation commission was to just cut you a check for the maximum number of meetings and not try to track how many meetings you attend or don't attend and run that through. The payroll check will be issued in December each year for the full amount of the meetings. We thought that was a better way to do it rather than worrying about how many meetings you're attending. So we made that recommendation and they did approve it. So
Can I ask a question about that? So for like in election years, when there's like incoming council and they've only, is the intention to prorate that? And is that like, so for example, I started again last November, just worked November, December theoretically, right? 2 months out of the, is it 2/12, is that the intention, or?
Well, the way that it was approved and the way that it's worded, it would be, so November's the election, so I think it would start the new year at that point. Instead of going fiscal year, like we used to do as fiscal year. So your November meeting would be one meeting in November and then December. So I think it's worded, I don't have it in front of me, November, I believe. Or does it say December?
It says just
It said
year
in
as far as-
December. So I'm saying that the end of November would be the end of the year and it will start over again.
So my question is the intention, so I have it right here, right? So it says, blah, 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 blah. They said that the councilperson shall receive the sum of $1,400 for meetings attended in '24 until '25 to be paid annually in December. So December of '24, but this is, I guess, because it's already in the past and that doesn't matter. Oh no, 24 is this year. That time machine's
So
working.
So you
So-
were, the council was paid through January.
So,
So we're starting a new year at this point, so
So-
it would have been the next quarter, and so it will look at the whole year.
so there's a new election in '25, right? There's new council people whose terms are up in '25. So new people get seated in November of '25. Is the way this reads,
That they would get the
the full
$1,400.
amount, right?
I would argue they should probably get the prorated amount.
Does it say through 25, or does it say 24?
This is
Because
exactly-
the election's not till November,
It says meetings attended in 2024 until 2025.
but there's another compensation commission meeting in 25.
So that you could modify for the incoming.
So I figured there would be another meeting prior to the election,
And then
which is
you could
usually what happens, and then
introduce-
they'll determine what the new date will be.
And, well, so they would need to introduce the ability to prorate for the incoming in '25, because right now it looks like they would get the full 1,400 in December of '25, even if they were.
And I will say this, that typically our council has went over 35 meetings in a year.
I don't
So-
disagree with that. My only question is, incoming council in November of '25 is gonna work 2 months. The way it's written, I read they get the full year's amount. So in '25, when the compensation commission meets, they should modify that to the extent that a not full year is worked, the prorated amount would be received or something like that. That's,
That'll cross the Ts and dot the lowercase j's, yes.
yeah.
And my guess is we would have the compensation commission meeting prior to
Yes.
it, so they would reset it anyway. So I don't think we need to worry about prorating necessarily. The new language would cover from that point forward, so it would be reworded. So it was just to cover through 25, or 24, through the end of the year, well, it would be paid annually, is what the intent is.
Yeah, I understand.
Starting
but I
in
think
December, so.
Someone's captured the concept that I
I captured the concepts.
Okay.
We're not going to pay a freshman council member $1,400 in December.
For 2 months'
Their
work,
first-
right.
no, That's not going to
Right,
happen.
but the way it's written, we are, so we need to modify that. So-
Unless the
Okay.
decision is made to pay them in advance, which could happen, because if you're gonna get paid $1,400 for the year, you could get $1,400 in December to cover you all the way through 2026. So it could be an in-advance payment if the compensation commission wants to do it
Well,
that
that's-
way. And then when you come up on the next year, same thing.
It
So
would just need, I guess the point is, we need to make sure that, thinking of budgeting, that if you're gonna pay them the full amount, then that's for next year, so I get that.
I'll make sure to put a note in the binder for the next meeting.
Cool.
I already have the minutes there, so we'll make sure that when we present to the next compensation commission
They take
at their meeting, that they're aware of a clarification that needs to be
Timing and
done.
Duration and the
But I think we're covered for now.
Yes.
And for the record, we've always participated in far more meetings than we've been compensated for.
Oh,
Like the
Yeah,
last,
she was
usually
just
the
talking about any
last,
council member coming in and paying.
but usually by the last round of payments, we're down to like none, right? Or very one or two.
Yeah, we hit the
We've always been
1,400.
over.
Or is it the $1,400 seemed pretty quick? I'm curious, if this is a one-time payment, are we being paid in advance or after completion?
that's the determination that they'll have to make. I think the thought was that they would be paid in advance in December, would cover you for.
Well, no, they are due right now because they had their last quarter of 23 that was paid through December. So right now, January, February, March should be paid now. And the intent was to just pay the $1,400 in December for the year. Now, annual means annual, I suppose. It doesn't really matter. I doubt it matters to us when that gets paid.
That's what they'll need to determine, is whether it's an arrears payment or an advance payment. And my thought is they would prefer to pay it in advance so that you're compensated early in your term for the entire year until the following November. That's what they'll have to decide.
And I'll make sure we put a memo in there, a note
Right,
to that.
but
so
for
that
this
covers.
one, it's actually going to be in December for this year of '24.
And why was it decided to pay once a year? Just curious. Is that just so you don't have to?
Instead of identifying everyone's attendance, that it would just be
Yeah.
One time.
one check, one and done.
Right, we've gone from hourly to salary, which is fine.
Basically, yes. Thank you. Thank you.
My question is this, if you're paying once a year, it brings in all sorts of complications. If you pay ahead, person's on council for 3 or 4 months and they resign,
They'll have to address it.
so they'll have to refund the payment. And then the reverse would be, if you paid somebody at the end, and say somebody resigned, they might be looking for their check, knocking on the door, hey, by the way, I'm not in council anymore, but you owe me.
Because we're all here for the money.
I feel ridiculous even talking these things, but just the idea of.
Those things will have to be worked out.
And we could easily address that if someone were to leave before the end of the year and prorate they earned it. I mean, they're entitled to it.
So, and I jumped in before you got to it, but the council piece goes on to talk about how the 4th of July costs are put in against council. Can you explain just the mindset of having those costs be attributed to city council?
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is something that came up last year and was included because there is a cost to host the 4th of July events. And to demonstrate that cost, that's where that was put last year with the then finance director.
So how is, I don't understand how, I get wanting to recoup the costs, no objection to that.
It's not necessarily recouping, it's actually accounting.
Accounting for it, you're correct, I get accounting for the cost, but how is that a city council expense? I mean, I could see Parks and Rec, I could see community DPW, community outreach, like it just, so and here's my concern. We get some accounting wizard, which I am not, but some accounting wizard who's gonna run for council and they start looking at the budget and they're like, what do you mean you spent $37,500 or $77,000 on council? These people are overpaid, whatever. I mean, it just doesn't belong there, right? So
It was placed there for an accounting purpose. Now, if council or I feel it needs to go someplace.
I have no objection to moving it.
I don't object to
where
moving it either.
We
but
feel it makes more sense. I have no objection to moving it to, I mean, I tend to use City Hall as kind of a
catch-all.
catch-all, yeah, so I can put it to City Hall. I mean, if it's
That would make
distributed
more
among
sense.
city, again, it's not necessarily a council function. I think it was put there because the idea was brought forward and they said, look, we'd like to basically reimburse ourselves to help cover the 4th of July
Sure.
committee's cost. But yeah, I have no objection moving that elsewhere where, and again, to me, if City Hall works, would that work for everyone or?
The other, what about Christmas? Is there any expenses associated with that? Does that apply in City
Not
Hall?
on that level.
Not
Santa?
to the level of Fourth of
Not,
July.
yeah, not anywhere near that
Okay.
level.
But there's a cause, is there?
I mean, we could get into the each and on just about every
Yeah.
little event, but there is also a much higher profile with the 4th of July.
Yep.
And it is a substantial cost to the city that the previous finance director, and I agreed with her, and I still think it's important that we demonstrate to the public that there is a cost to host this.
Sure.
Is there any efforts being made to recoup this cost?
Anything above the cost that is allotted by council. And last year they stayed below that.
And so to Mr. Pollack's point, with the narrative that's under City Hall, I can see why that makes sense. So City Hall budget includes several items that impact other departments and funds but are not broken out by such an invoice, so that makes sense to move it to City Hall.
I will do that, I will move that. Any other questions on City Council? City Manager, at this point in time in the 24-25 budget, it will just be the City Manager. We had Over the years, I think there was a split of time, there was an attempt to put Nick in some of his hours in there. It hasn't worked very well through payroll, so we're just gonna move that to be just the city manager. We moved, we'll get to this later, but we did move Nick into the community development department. And I believe the other charges there again, like professional services, generally municipal analytics and the ICMA tools utilized in the city manager's office. But the line items themselves are basically fairly much the same as they were in previous years. Under elections, I budgeted for 2, that is right, Michelle, correct? Next year, two elections next year, November and
August and November.
August, okay. Wait, is it August this year?
August this year.
Okay.
August and
August this
November
year and
this
November
year.
this year. Okay, those
So
are the two.
the city election will be in the next budget year.
Okay, I don't know, I was thinking
So I just
was
have
one
two.
short, but I remember you telling me there was 2, so just wanted to be sure of that. But if the only ones that are reimbursed, I'd like
Where
to
the
speak to
school and
that.
the presidential primary were getting reversed on.
Okay. So, and if there is a reimbursement, it would go back to the revenue item in the general fund. So, but anything Michelle needs for elections, equipment, postage are in that department. We're at 44.8 for 24-25. The accounting budget is myself.
Before you go on,
Sure.
sorry, as far as for all the changes that have taken place over the past year, are we final for the, not the precinct, well, I guess precincts.
Redistricting.
Redistricting, yeah.
We won't know the impact of that. And just moving a precinct to a new location because Shalom's going to be gone.
Yeah.
There will be a cost to mailing out ID cards for that one precinct,
Okay.
which has been included in this. The redistricting that may come may require us to do a little more. We may have to draw the host city district lines depending on what they do. We've had to do that before. So if we do that, we'll probably reconfigure maybe down to 4 precincts because the amount per precinct has changed, has gone up by state law.
Okay.
So we can do that. So we may be able to transition to 4. I'm not recommending to go to 4 at this point. With the Shalom going away, I'm hoping just to relocate it to hopefully the elementary school behind. So we'll have 2 voting locations at their buildings back here.
Yep.
And then Kenwood's under construction. We're hoping to be able to still continue to use the gym during their renovation time.
Yeah.
They've kind of let Mr. Raker know that should be able to be done. My main concern is for an election is not to disrupt the voters. On a big election is to move them. I really hate that we're having to move Shalom,
Yeah.
but I want them moved by August so that they're in the new location for November. So that's kind of the goal.
So we don't have a location that's non-governmental or quasi-governmental, like a church, that's not there yet.
We'll have to relook at that.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, it'd be nice to get them out of all the schools.
Yep.
However, we don't have enough places to do that,
Well,
so.
the kids would not like that.
And at this point right now, if we're gonna be in one school building, we might as well have them in the schools, because they're
Yeah.
closing that day anyways.
Yep.
So it makes sense that we continue to use those locations.
Okay.
So we're gonna take a look at that.
Does the budgeted amount include cost for the early voting?
Yes.
Do we have, okay.
Early voting and the absentee voting counting board that happens at the county, that's included in the budget now.
Okay.
It's in the professional services. The accounting budget is myself and Chris. For those of you that don't know Chris lives in Texas, but she does our bank reconciliations and assists during the audit. She continues to stay on top of all of our banking and does an excellent job. There's not a lot of other costs with me in the position right now because I don't require the other benefits. And I don't have any professional services. I may go to MGFOA or something of that nature occasionally, but at this point I don't have any further education plans. I'm too close to retirement for that. So the budget for the accounting department does include our audit. It does include our banking fees as well. So the budget there is $259,135. Assessor is our Oakland County equalization contract and our board of review.
Before we go on, I'm sorry, in counting, it looks like professional services jumps from 3,500 to 21,500, but there's a other professional services. What are those?
Yeah, the professional services for my department is mostly the BS&A, and other costs are accounting software. Let's see. I thought I had eliminated, because there were several that had professional services and other professional services.
Right, I was just kind of curious what.
Yeah, the other
combining those.
the other professional services, I don't have anything budgeted coming up because I combined that into the 801. So if you follow that other professional services across, there's money in this year, but there's no money in the budget for 24, 25. Because they're the same thing. They really are the same thing.
Okay.
So I eliminated the other professional services, I eliminated, and I put
And
everything into professional.
And basically, it's all for software.
Yeah. Other than software maintenance. We have software maintenance, and then I have professional services for, there's Munetrics, there's municipal analytics, which I think I split. So it's mainly those services, and because we separate out our audit services under its own line item, and we do have a software maintenance line item, so those are mostly they're not software, they're the other professional services that I deal with, which is, there's some payroll, and those are ones that I try to split, whether it's the finance department, accounting department, or city hall. We try to split those where we can, so, but I can get you an exact breakdown of what those are right now, but off the top of my head, I don't know specifically what they all are, but I do know I got rid of the other professional services because they're the same thing. There was two, basically a duplicate line item, 801 and 809 were the same thing. Okay. Yeah, I will send you a breakdown exactly what all that is.
Thanks.
And our assessor is the Oakland County equalization contract and our board of review. They, I know over the years, people ask, well, you know, would it be cheaper if we had our own assessor? And it would not. We've looked at it before. It would definitely not. The Oakland County equalization provides all of our services for a contracted amount. And generally, it's a 3-year price lock for them. And they do it based on the number of parcels that they deal with, both commercial and real. So still at 101.4, it's still a better deal than if we had our own assessor in-house. They do a great job. Represent quite a few communities in Oakland County. City attorney is, we have the fixed cost for retainer for Mr. Nushai's services for both prosecuting and for city attorney services. And then anything above and beyond for fees is also included. We budgeted a $147,000 line item for next year. Under city clerk, we currently have 2 full-time employees in that department, and much like my situation, Michelle's retired from here and back, so there's not a lot of the standard benefit costs to the city right now, so those are not, although we do know if Michelle ever leaves, we'll have to add those back in. But at this point in time, the fees or the salaries and wages and benefits in the department involve less. And currently, we do have Vince in that department as a deputy clerk at the moment, so performing those duties.
I haven't heard much about the deputy city clerk hiring. So there's a new person?
Yes, since It's been, what?
January.
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 Yes.
Okay. Was there an announcement?
I don't
No,
know.
No,
it has
it
been
was posted,
discussed.
but there wasn't necessarily an announcement.
Okay.
No, I mean, he was already internal, working in the community, and he applied for the position. That's probably why we didn't think to make a big announcement, because he was already on staff, and we just simply moved from one office to the next.
Okay.
And the name is?
Vince Smith is as the
Let
deputy.
the public know, you know.
Yes. And he has been since January.
The treasurer's office, we have 3 full-time employees there. Treasurer, deputy treasurer, and an administrative clerical. All the benefit line items are there as well, and that's the area where we have the printing of our tax bills and the tax coupons for the installments. Recommended budget there is $308,300. The city hall, this is, we mentioned earlier, I do kind of include items that aren't specific to any one department, so it tends to be a little bit of a catch-all with some of the professional services as well. Our IT services, and then our broadcast and cable production for the most part are in that line, or in that department as well. Our public utilities for City Hall are in there. And then we did put the reconfiguration for safety security of City Hall in the budget this year for $400,000. We are working from a rough estimate that we were given from our engineering firm to reconfigure City Hall and redo the council chambers. So we put $400,000 in for that, and the total in City Hall is $710,500.
Can I ask a question? When do you anticipate that work is going to start?
So actually, AEW is working on the proposed layout as we speak, and I would anticipate, pending the outcome of that, and the approval of this budget as soon as possible. So to get things moving, just so we also have to synchronize the safety, security, and IT and audio visual. So that's going to be ongoing.
So $400,000 is a lot of money, so those contracts are going to be like at the amount that council's going to need to approve the contracts for that work. So we would get the contracts as they're coming in, is that
Yes,
correct? Okay,
absolutely.
gotcha.
Yeah, all this, you would receive all that, and none of this would happen. And I say this for this budget, and then also for anything, should a successful bond initiative be passed, those things come back to council as well.
The liability insurance is got jumping from 30,000 to 35. Is there? Did we get a new quote or?
We haven't yet. We do break that down amongst different funds as well. I do anticipate an increase. In fact, we're meeting with them on May 9th to go through some of our liability. Michelle and I work on that together for property. Is for everything. It's buildings and property. So we're trying to. They've done a really good job keeping our costs low, comparatively speaking. I think with all of our buildings, they reassess our buildings every few years. That's the one thing. Our buildings are appreciating as opposed to everything else that's depreciating. But they cover all of our equipment and all of our buildings, and I do anticipate the increase. That might be a little bit on the high end, trying to be conservative, but we'll know for sure after we meet with them and they give us the proposal for next budget year. We usually don't get that figure until closer to June. So, but I did anticipate a small increase, so I know percentage-wise that's a little bit higher increase, but. On our police department, obviously that being our biggest department as far as costs, we currently have our chief and a staff of 4 sergeants. We are moving to a 5th sergeant as part of our discussions with the police department. There are currently 11 patrol officers, and there is an effort ongoing now to add to 12. Someone, I think, in fact, is in the academy right now to bring them back to full strength. We have our police records clerk full-time in there as well. There will be some discussion on crossing guards once the reconfiguration of our schools happens next year. They'll decide where they're going to put crossing guards. I don't know necessarily there might be a couple less, but they'll be placed in areas around the city to make sure our students are getting to and from school safe, the few that do walk these days. Let's see, our police, our remaining 3 active employees are eligible for the MERS defined benefit pension. 2 of them are in our police department. So there's still some cost there for a defined benefit pension. And our vehicle leases, they've had good luck with leases for police vehicles going forward. The one issue right now is they're at the moment, they're not building the Ford Explorers for us to be able to lease. They're building a Tahoe, a Chevy Tahoe. So those are being outfitted, and part of our capital costs is to fit those new is a little higher cost. But then once if we continue to go with the Tahoes, then the cost to kind of retrofit those with the older equipment won't be as high. But in the capital, we do have the plan that was brought forward by Chief Baus, and the capital vehicle amounts is in there for the equipment replacement. If explained in there, if the Explorers are no longer available, the cost will be a little bit higher on the front end, and then should drop off if we're continuing to get the Tahoes. And I think at that point in time, that's probably what will happen. But at this point, we cannot get the Explorers through the lease. And total police recommended budget is 2.9.
It's all right. We'll get to it.
Okay.
So how long are the leases?
The leases are generally 3-year for the police vehicles, and I think we also have a few outside the police department. The DPW, we're looking at DPW possibility. We do have vehicles, the code vehicle and some of the other ones are leased as well.
Did that work out did that work out as we expected? I remember when we approved that a few years back.
As far as I know, it's working out really well. I know when I was here before, the former chief did not want to entertain the lease because he liked the program of replacing and then selling, but I think now that the lease option has been much more affordable than it was probably in past years, so it is working well for them.
I noticed there's $188,000 budgeted for overtime. Is there any efforts to reduce overtime costs or maybe hire another officer for that kind of?
There have been constant efforts to hire officers. That is a national challenge right now, is hiring police officers, and we're down one. We created incentives in this last collective bargaining agreement, so where it's the chief has discretion to bring someone in at a higher pay rate based on their experience, and also sponsorship through the academy.
Okay, so the overtime is because we're down.
Yes.
So,
The expectation is it will go down once we add that 12th officer.
the flock cameras that were just approved, I know there's another payment due next year. Is that included in here?
$12,000, yes.
I'm sorry, I was
Is
just
it under the
curious where it
vehicle line
was.
item right here? The flat one?
Is it under capital equipment or membership?
I'll check with the chief on where she has that budgeted.
Okay.
Any other questions on police? Our code enforcement, we have 2 code enforcement officers. Currently, again, they're utilizing one of the leased vehicles for code enforcement, and the recommended budget amount for them next year is $42,740. Our fire department, we currently have 27 part-paid volunteer firefighters. They receive an annual stipend. Their chief and the captains receive a little bit more than the regular firefighters. They have a life insurance policy provided by the city. We are going to recommend a multiplier increase the firefighter pension. They have not been adjusted, did we ever go back?
20 years.
20 years. So they had made a recommendation at the board level, and we are recommending that that will come before council. We're recommending through our ordinance process to approve that increase, and the estimated additional cost would be $107,000, and we did put that in the 2024-25 pension contribution. And their annual expenses budgeted for the upcoming year is $429,650. This is, we had a Department 400, which we had as planning. With Nick's recommendation and conversation with he and Joe, we decided to combine the planning department, building department, and the community and economic development department, which were under 400 and 428 into community and economic development 428. To kind of better consolidate those services, it was a decision made that we felt was better served for the city to have all those under one umbrella. And we are calling it the Community and Economic Development Department. We'll have 4 full-time employees under that newly formed department, and including the recently added Communications and Development Specialist, Brandon. One of our largest costs is the inspectors. The 75% of their inspection fees is paid via payroll to them through this department. So we did have a bit of an overlap for when permits are pulled versus when they're inspected. I know it took quite a while for the high rise, especially for those permits to be pulled and paid for, and then our inspectors to be paid. So we did have a little lapse over a couple of years, but we expect it to be a little bit closer to when they're performing their services for the upcoming year. But we do have increases expected in the building department revenues, therefore that our expenses will be a little bit higher to the tune of 75% of that. So the recommended budget for those combined departments is $843,010. Our DPW, we currently have 3 of our...
I'm sorry, one real quick. The professional services for the old professional services for planning and development was 140. And the professional services for community and economic development was 120 in the last year's budget. Now, if you add those up, if you're combining them, it seemed like it would be 260, but you're only asking for 215. Is there a reason there's a cost savings?
It was Nick's recommendation at the time that he did not believe there were 2 professional service projects that either are completed or are not going to occur.
Okay.
That he had, is that right?
So that decision was made because the master plan was funded in the last fiscal year, and that's going to be most likely wrapping up in July or August of this calendar year, and therefore that expenditure will not be needed. And the master plan was roughly, I'd have to go and confirm, $35,000 to $40,000. So that's where that number comes
So basically Giffords bill is going down.
from. Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
DPWs, we have 3 full-time employees assigned, our superintendent assistant, and then one of our DPW employees. We do have a fixed charge there for motor equipment and administrative charges. One of the things we're addressing with our motor equipment shortfall from last year is to assign a fixed charge, administrative charge as well, so that we're not so reliant on the actual rental of the equipment that we charge. But we do have $50,000 in that, and then $65,000 goes back to the motor equipment fund as a revenue to offset it. And our total in the DPW is $618,270. Our street lighting, this is our DTE street lighting billing that we receive monthly. It's probably about time we push back a little bit on them, because we did put LED lighting, which we were told we would get return on investment. I don't think it's as good as they had originally proposed, but I think it's time to talk with them again about, starting to recoup some of those savings, because the annual costs continue to rise, so.
That's
And-
DTE Energy?
That's DTE, yeah.
Is that because we're in a budget as opposed to actual billing, or why?
Well, they bill for the number of lights, and there was a LED agreement when the LED lights replaced a good majority of the existing lights, that there would be an initial increase in cost and then a decrease due to the reduced cost of LED lights.
Like those would be cheaper than the other lights?
Yes.
And they haven't done that yet?
There was a cost for installation that they rolled into the cost, but we've got to be getting close to the point where the LED, that cost is paid and the LED cost savings starts to reflect. So we should get a reduction in our cost at some point.
I'm guessing the streetlights aren't metered individually?
No, they don't meter them individually, but they do have like a per light charge or per pole charge that they
Okay.
assess to us. But that was the original plan for the LED replacements, was there would be cost for the actual equipment and the replacement and the labor. And then after a number of years, we would start to once that was paid, we would start to reap the benefits of the LED energy costs, which would be reduced. So it's probably time to reach out to them and find out when that is. But our budgeted amount is $252,000 for our streetlights. Senior programs, we now have Lisa Ball is now our senior program coordinator and our assistant Parks and Rec director in that department. And we also have our part-time drivers. They drive our smart minibus and our van for our senior programs. They're in there as well under part-time. We do have some vehicle maintenance and transportation. I do know that Scott is looking into the smart credits, which we receive on an annual basis. He wants to make sure that those reports are caught up. I think when I was here before, Kathy Leanox handled all that, and I'm sure Gina was working on handling that, was probably overwhelmed at some point in time. But Scott's going to try and make sure between he and Lisa that they get the smart credits applied for and back into revenues. But total budget in the senior program department is $205,820.
The part-time salary doubled from last year. Was a new person hired?
Well, there were some increases, but they also, I honestly don't know. There was a move to move part-time people into full-time people. I don't know why that was. The previous finance director was trying to get rid of part-time tracking. I'm not sure why that was, but it's certainly not something I want to do. I think keeping part-time people in part-time wages makes sense.
What's your question, sir?
Well, the question was, I was just curious, it was the last amended budget was $40,000 for part-time salaries, and now it's $84,500. I was just curious why that went up.
I think it was because she was trying to move all of the part-time. It's the same issue with the library. She was trying to move the part-timers into the full-time line item at every level. I don't know why that was. So we moved them back to part-time.
What I'm doing is when we have those questions, I'm writing them down and we'll provide those answers to you in the next week.
Thank you.
Yeah, but that is, she did take the number of part-timers that she has and multiplied it out times the number of hours they work. So I think it was under budgeted because there was an attempt to move part-time into full-time, and we're moving back to putting part-timers in part-time. So. Youth assistance is a continuing program. This is our portion, $6,200 in conjunction with the school district in Oakland County. In our Parks Department, we do have 4 full-time DPW employees. We just added one with our last budget approval, one of the new employees they hired will be assigned to parks as well with the other 3 that we had. Same thing there, they have fixed charge via the motor equipment fund as well for equipment usage. Total amount in parks budgeted is 506,030.
Okay, so we hired 3.5 new DPW employees, right, or we're trying to,
Right,
and one of them is for parks,
right.
but the full-time salaries actually went down.
Yeah, and once again, I think the budgeted amount of salaries was incorrect for the previous budget year.
Okay,
I think it was budgeted too high. And again, I think that, once again, another product of trying to move part-timers into the full-time line item
okay.
boosted the full-time. Recreation, we have one full-time employee in our recreation department, our Parks and Rec coordinator. We have quite a few part-time employees. I know Scott is currently working on staffing park attendants, as we've had in past years. They will be included in the part-time employees. And he also has some of the permanent part-timers work at Hunter through the year as well, more so in the summer programs. That's where all the Hunter Community Center supplies, maintenance, and repair activities are, and the utilities for that building as well. And as I mentioned earlier, Scott is working on the Rec Pro is the name of the software. The department's never had an actual receipting system, and Scott was very familiar with this and made the recommendation to move forward with that, to be able to, it'll be much easier for residents to register, and then it'll be much easier for them to record revenue for those activities through the Rec Pro software program.
Could we get a demonstration of that at some point in time, just to understand?
Yeah,
what that
we
is?
can ask Scott to actually come to a
Okay.
council meeting and do
In
it.
community education.
Yeah.
use of it.
Is that Rec Pro software why the professional services jumped up by
Yes.
50%?
Yeah. And the total for that department is $306,485.
So janitorial services for recreation, is it the same
Yeah.
then at this first?
Yeah, this bill, I think we have the same as Stone Clean.
Yes.
That does all of our janitorial services. Historical Museum, we have our part-time curator, Leah. She is working on archiving and scanning old documents. She had mentioned she's looking for a software program, hasn't found one yet, to try and assist her with that. But if she makes that and we need to amend the budget, we'll bring that to council for approval. But she does a lot with very little, as have all of our previous museum curators. They work with a very small budget and do quite a bit. But she is seeing a lot of activity and interest in the museum, people coming through, so she's motivated and excited in her role. But our total budget there is $34,580. Our other functions at this point is unemployment, and we're a reimbursing employer. So if someone collects unemployment, they bill us quarterly for reimbursement of those unemployment collections. We don't pay into a fund as a reimbursing employer. So I budgeted $5,000 for that. And then I did one of the moves that I went back to was our retiree health insurance. There was an attempt to try and track that within departments, which again, very difficult to do, and I didn't see it being a benefit. So I went back to recording retiree health care in the 863 department. And we are closed to new hires for retiree health insurance, have been for a while. Some in 99 and some in 2005. And years ago, we put together with a committee to try and make it affordable and sustainable, and it's remained pretty sustainable and affordable over the years. But we do have two different retiree options, a pre-65 and a post-65, which have worked pretty well for us. And as our retirees, I feel like we have a chart every year. We always, I always go back to Tom Palmer's quote many years ago, former council member. So when all these people croak, we won't have to pay for it anymore. And I said, well, I wouldn't put it that way, but yes, that's exactly right. So that's something over time that will eventually, you know, their costs will decrease and go away. But we budgeted $749,500 for that. And then the MERS retiree costs, we do have, as I mentioned before, we have 3 active employees that are in the MERS defined benefit program remaining. We have a B3 to B4 benefit for, I believe there's 4 AFSCME employees. And our budgeted amount for that department is $198,950 for the year.
That seemed to have jumped too. Is that because that's what MERS
Yeah.
tells us what we need to pay?
Yeah, the operating costs fluctuate from year to year, and yeah, and as we were, when we bonded, we were over 100% funded, and then with the returns of a couple years ago, dropped below 100, and each year they do the actuarial report. They say, here's the additional amount you need to put in to get you back to 100% funded. They amortize that over a number of years, and that causes the payment to fluctuate from time to time. So yeah, that is going up a little bit.
If I could just I know previously retirement benefits were kind of in a lump. I think Mr. Rake, when you came on board, you by and large tried to distribute things like healthcare retirement per department. I'm assuming that the retiree health insurance and the MERS weren't amenable to that, so these two, as well, I guess one's a legacy cost, one you've got 3 active employees.
Yeah.
It's just better for paperwork that these 2 programs be treated separate.
Yeah, the
Even as
retiree portion, yes.
Okay, even as the other employees,
Yeah,
their
the
retirement.
the 3 actives, there is a cost in the department that they're assigned to for their operation, basically their operational retirement, but the actual retirement cost itself is in this department. So yeah, there's a small cost in each of the departments, the 3. It's 2 in the police and 1 in the DPW. So there is a DB cost in those departments. But yes, for the current actives. But everyone else is under the MERS DC plan.
okay, which is distributed by department.
Yes, by department. Yeah. For our transfers out, that is the bond for the pension. There's a payment due each year, and that's distributed through a formula as well to, I believe there's 3 different funds that pay for that as well, or 4. And there's a distribution calculation done each year. And this year it's budgeted for $819,920, which I believe is the same cost as the previous year. I believe there's 8 years left on those bond payments. And then once again, once the bonds are paid for that cost will go away. The debt payments, we have the Act 99 installment financing for the building project that was done, energy efficiency, back in 2013. The Honeywell did that project back then. I believe there is 5 or 6 years left. No, there's 2028 on that. So we do have a few years left on that financing. And once again, once that's paid, that cost will disappear. And then there is one more payment on the fire pumper that we took out a loan 4 years ago. That's in the next budget here. And then the total of those is $312,910. And just as a summary, we're recommending total budgets of $10,353,080 on the expenditure side, with the revenue of $10,014,960. We expect a fund balance use from the reserve of $338,120. and I just summarized the fund balance. I expect will be about 400,000 to the plus during the current fiscal year. So we'll be around 2,650,000 at the end of this fiscal year, and then this 338 would drop our fund balance to 2,312,51, which is a 24.3% fund balance reserve.
So you use that, this represents a X fund balance reserve comment throughout this document. Can you explain to me, as a non-accounting person, exactly what that means, what that represents?
So what that represents is the percentage of fund balance reserve is I take a 3-year expenditure average of the fund. So if we average $9 million in expenditures for the last 3 years, I take what is left in fund balance and I convert that to a percentage, which is 24.3% reserve means we have 24.3% of our annual expenditures on average over the last 3 years in reserve.
So it's not like a real concrete number, it's a theoretical
Right.
sort of, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just use the average because there's some years, and generally you pull out your transfers, because we had the $2.5 million transfer of last year. You wouldn't include that in your expenditures to try and see an average expenditure years. You generally use non-transfer expenses and then come up with a percentage.
So what's the philosophy or the value behind that number? Like what's a good number, what's a bad number, or how is that?
Well, the city has a policy of 10% reserve. So, and what that policy laid out was that if the city wanted to go below 10% reserve, the council would have to make an action to spend that money. A good percentage generally is considered 20% or above. Cities have different thought processes on that, but we have a 10% policy reserve. So at the time we set that policy, 10% was a good number. If you're above 20, you're generally considered healthy.
Is that 10% for each category, or is that 10%? Because that statement's used several times in here.
It's just for, the 10% is just for the general fund
Gotcha.
balance. The other ones, again, in most communities don't develop fund balance policy reserve outside of the general fund because it can fluctuate so much. And there's one in here later, I think, where we have a 500% reserve. So
Right.
So it depends. For general fund is generally the fund everyone focuses on in municipalities. 20% or better is generally considered very healthy.
Okay.
I have a question. Just at first glance, you mentioned expenditures of $10,353,000. Revenue at $10,014,000. So at first glance, the average person reading this, they would say, well, it looks like you spent about $340,000 more than you brought in, and yet we have a $400,000 surplus. How does that play out?
Well, that was actually the overlap of the current fiscal year and what we're budgeting for 24-25. The $400,000 is what I expect when we get to June 30 of this year, of 2024, we'll have about a $400,000 surplus in the current fiscal year. Next fiscal year, what we're budgeting is a $338,000 deficit. So, and what I was saying was, the surplus we're going to see this year would be offset by a fund balance, use of fund balance or deficit next year. Still end up adding, because we're at $2,250,000 in fund balance now. We add 400, we'll be at 2,650,000. We use the 338, we'll be down to 2,312,000. So that's actually an overlap of the 2 years. I wanted to mention that in the current year, we're going to have a surplus in our budget. The one we're budgeting, we're working on now, we're going to have a deficit.
Intentionally.
Yes. And spending, expended use of fund balance it was budgeted to have a large deficit this year, but when we eliminated the potential grants and the transfer, that took us back to a surplus.
Right, deliberately because we funded certain capital improvement projects with that money. Okay.
Any other questions? If not, I can move on to our major streets fund. In our major street funds, majority of the revenue comes from our gas weight taxes from the state of Michigan. Those do fluctuate every year based on sales from month to month. We get a monthly distribution from the state. We're anticipating the state will issue about $958,000 in reimbursement to us for our revenue in that fund. We don't have a lot of other sources of revenue there. We do have some interest income on investment. So I'm budgeting $976,000 in revenue. Our expenditures, we do have 3 full-time employees of our DPW assigned to our major street fund. We did break out, one of the changes we made was we broke out so that we could track our routine maintenance, road repair, our spray patch, and then the other repairs that we do in general, just so we could track those for the new projects that we're kind of doing now are either going to be the concrete road repair, the spray patch, or other repairs that we utilize. And same thing here, some of the equipment utilized to maintain our roads is a expense here and a revenue to our motor equipment fund. We are allowed by the state under Act 51 to transfer money from our major to our local streets on an annual basis. The city's done that probably forever because it's you get less revenue for your local street fund and you tend to have more to maintain as far as repairs go in your local street. So I anticipate we'll transfer $230,000 from major to local streets to supplement the local street fund. And our expenditure budget for the upcoming year, because we do have some programs in there for repair, hopefully to coincide with our infrastructure. We have 1.6 million in there, so we do have a budgeted expenditure of fund balance. And the summary of that is we have 1.486 in our fund balance estimated. Same situation where we're expecting by the end of this fiscal year we'll have 1,486,000 in fund balance in our major street fund, and our use of fund balance 195,930, and then this is another example where you use the percentage of average expenditures. We'll have a healthy 130.7% of fund balance reserve at the end of the next fiscal year.
Now, the major streets are 14 Mile, Main Street, or those?
Yeah, I think we have some, like Elmwood qualifies as a major street. Some of the ones that are, local, that run through local areas are also classified as major streets as well. But yeah, the majority of major streets are the actual 14 Mile Main Street.
Now, we're responsible for those, not the county?
The counties has some responsibility along 14 Mile. The road commission does on Crooks. And I think Main Street is all ours. But yeah, there's a section of 14 Mile that's county maintained, and then Crooks Road as well.
Okay.
The bigger road.
Rochester Road too?
Go ahead.
Rochester Road?
Rochester Road's another county. I think that might be all county as well.
What we'll do
Yeah,
is,
in one of the CIP plans they laid out.
it
There
does.
are about 10 miles of major roads and 30
Yes,
miles of
yes,
local
that's a good
streets. So a
recollection.
grand total of 40 in the city.
Yeah, the DPW has a nice map, I think, that lays that out.
I don't want to sound too ignorant, but there's 3 DPW employees assigned to the major street fund. What do they do from day to day? I mean, they're not out fixing the road every day, obviously.
No, it's the breakdown of the employees. The reality is they don't all exclusively do what they're assigned to.
Okay.
They do multiple tasks on a daily basis. We utilize what we're like through Act 51. There's a percentage limit of what we can expend for administrative, and that would be employee expenses. So we just take the amount we're allowed, and we do assign 3 employees to the major street funds. You're right, they're not out constantly doing road
Okay.
maintenance, but they may do other tasks. And that's the thing, we talked about that years ago, was trying to track everything they do on an annual basis. And there was an attempt to do it through payroll and distribute those, but again, it was a huge undertaking, and it didn't really bear the fruit that we were looking for. So we just assigned, again, there's 3 individuals assigned. They may, in a week, they might not spend any time working on a major road.
Okay.
The reality. So, but they are assigned to it, and it's because we're allowed to assign a certain amount to each fund, which is what we do. We do have, like, our water and sewer guys tend to work mostly in the water and sewer fund, but they're likely going to do other tasks as well.
Okay, so I see that the requested budget's 40 grand higher than last year. Is that because of a new employee, or?
Yeah, we have the full amount assigned, and a lot of that's maintenance as well. We're trying to do as much of the roads that are not targeted for complete reconstruction. We're trying to maintain them a little bit more and get more life out of those as much as we can, and that's kind of that concrete repair and the spray patch program that we're utilizing. We do expect we want to continue the joint sealing, which was just approved. We want to continue to do joint sealing on the roads that are in good shape. So the main function of the major and local streets is to try and maintain the roads, not necessarily to reconstruct them. So Act 51, in fact, doesn't allow you unless you jumps through quite a few hoops, but we do the maintenance exclusively really through major and local streets.
So spray patch is defined as maintenance.
Yes, routine maintenance.
Whereas I think our miscellaneous concrete is maybe a little above and beyond what DPW can do?
It's reported through the Transportation Asset Management Council as routine maintenance. Even if you take a chunk, sections of concrete the way we do, that's considered maintenance. Unless you tear out a road and reconstruct it, it's considered maintenance.
Okay, so are we anticipating using our DPW people to do some miscellaneous concrete projects? Since it appears that they can be kind of a cost-effective way of extending the PACER rating of a road strip.
So we are considering a way to stretch our miscellaneous concrete dollars by potentially in-house doing the demolition and prep, and then having Hartwell come and then do the pour.
Okay.
So that's something that we're.
Do we have a breakdown of the 150,000 for road repair, exactly what that's going to be used for this year? Like a stretch on some street, or is it just kind of a guesstimate?
It is an estimate, but they've gathered a lot of information between Ryan and Trevor on the roads that need it the most, so we could provide something to you as to what the plans are, what roads are going to get the most money, because again, obviously if we go forward with the bond's approved, a lot of the roads that need full reconstruction obviously aren't under consideration, but the ones that are, maybe PACER rated 3 or 4, that could use a road repair or a patch that may extend the life another 5 years, those are ones we're looking at. But they'll have an idea of what roads those are that we could provide.
Yeah, there's currently, I think, just over 300 plus locations on the miscellaneous concrete program. Actually, we have a modification for a contract that I wanted to have at this meeting for approval, but it just didn't work out, to have roughly 40 locations at about $270,000. That'll be on the May 7th agenda meeting, but that list fluctuates as things develop. So, but I believe there was, I'll provide additional maps that I believe have been provided with their presentation, and I can provide them again for you. Thanks.
So does that cover repair due to water main breaks?
Yeah, some, and also catch basins that have collapsed. So it's water and sewer.
Local streets, much the same. We get significantly less revenue from the state for our local streets, which requires them, of course, to be able to operate that large transfer from the major local street fund. There's been a push for many years in Lansing to try and ease up some of the rules between major and local street funding, allow more flexibility They've created some, but they're still working on them to create more. But a big chunk, obviously, I think they estimate about $394,200 in gas and weight tax reimbursement to the city through the state, and then the $230,000 transfer in from the Major Street Fund is a large chunk of money as well. And same thing, there's some investment income there as well. But on the expenditure side, much like Major Streets, we're going to break out the expenditures for the routine maintenance. The Metro Authority is a large expense. We do have some money accumulated. We anticipate $85,000 for tree replacement coming up in the next budget year. They're also utilizing money from this year as well in that program. So we're doing our best when trees are removed to replace them, and the Metro Authority is a accepted use for that money. So we're utilizing that as much as we possibly can to replace trees.
How many trees would $85,000 buy? Roughly, I don't expect you to be exact, I'm just curious. What is a tree?
$300 a
About
tree.
$350 a pot.
Yeah, and that gives you a 2-year guarantee. They plant it and do the restoration for anything else, and what's called the finishing at the top, I don't know, say smolder and whatnot, and then there's instructions that are left with the property owner. So, and we're looking at developing more of a, this is a conversation I had with Nick and then also with Councilman Shepherd in regards to addressing flowering trees to offset. May rolls around, people start saying, hey, no more May, and last year in regards to pollinators, and so we're looking at having more flowering trees and identifying perhaps a new vendor that could give us the selection that we need to have a greater variety and healthier urban forest.
Nice, thank you.
And if my quick math is right, that's 283 trees.
So that'll offset the amount that we're taking out.
Yeah.
Well, everyone doesn't want one even, right? That's interesting that some
Maybe
people
it's
say,
flowering, but-
take it, but they don't want it.
You know, part of it is just where it should go, right? So that's, I appreciate the identification of some of the places that are lacking.
And then our fund balance impact in our local street fund, we anticipate being around $347,000 at the end of this fiscal year. We do expect to use $17,000 of our fund balance in the 24-25 budget, so we'll have about $329,958 remaining, which is a 50.3% fund balance reserve. So again, healthy fund balance for moving forward, but we are trying to expend as much as those funds for infrastructure repair wherever possible. Moving on to refuse collection fund, our Headley rollback millage will be 2.5110, the original levy, and then the additional voted override were rolled back to 2.511. That generates about just under 1.25 million. That's net of our DDA capture. We do have some collection fees there as well for some of our dumpsters. We get the LCSA distribution is the replacement of property tax the state established back when they eliminated some of the personal property tax for businesses years ago. They established the local community stabilization authority so they could reimburse some of the lost property tax revenue from businesses. So they redistribute that back on an annual basis. And some of that money does go back to our rubbish collection. Total recommended amount for the year is $1,292,000. Our contract with Sacra for our rubbish hauler, which is Tringali, anticipates a slight increase this year in our costs. That's figured in here, and we'll end up with our some of the costs that we pick up are really the motor equipment utilization. through the motor equipment fund, so there's charges there and administrative charges, but we're gonna end the year around $1,249,775 in expenses, so we will have a slight surplus in our fund balance. We're gonna end the year this year around 60,000, and adding about 40 to that will be just over 100,000, which from a percentage basis, again, is 8.5. That's less healthy, but at this point in time, we expect to maintain a positive fund balance, which, you know, if we got to the point where we were in danger of running into a negative fund balance, we would likely ask council to consider another Headley override for our rubbish millage, but right now, I think we're okay.
Can I ask a question about the fall leaf pickup? Just, I know that, like, in the past couple of years, it's always been, oh, the leaves fell late, and can you pick them up again? And they're like, no, we can't, because we have to switch over the equipment for the snow. And so, how is, this was all lumped in with the Tringali stuff, but how does that impact our ability to, the equipment used for that, if it's Tringali expenses, how does it impact our ability to do the snow?
Well, the Tringali expenses are really just for yard waste, and then they do a leaf roll-off through Sacra for the leaves. They actually take them somewhere, and then they technically recycle them for compost. So that is in-house, where there's no, it's other than the equipment we utilize, our leaf vacs that we utilize, there's no specific charge. It's just the individual's times. Tringali is all for our curbside yard waste pickup and things like that. That's part of our contract. So the costs in here that are leaves are really just the motor equipment that's utilized in the leaf pickup. So they, Ryan McDonald does a spreadsheet every 6 weeks and every week he puts in the breakdown of equipment used. That equipment cost gets charged to the rubbish fund, and then it goes back to the motor equipment fund, hopefully to repair and replace equipment. I mean, as we found over the years, and we do have leaf pickup in the five-year capital plan a couple of years down the road, because the equipment's so old, they're getting to the point where they can't fix it anymore. But as far as the expense goes here, it's just the motor equipment usage. It's not, there's no Tringali charge, I guess, technically for leaf pickup. It's part of our Sacra contract for leaf roll-off. So they take all those leaves that get sucked up into the trucks, and the vacuums go to a location for Sacra, and they're dumped, and they call it a roll-off. And there is a small charge for that that's included in Tringali, and then it goes to a compost facility.
So this statement here, in the second to the last line of the paragraph, leaf pickup during the fall months, that's for us turning the leaves in, or that's a estimate that DPW is doing? I'm just trying to understand how this, during leaf pickup.
The use of the equipment during that time frame, correct?
You're talking about our equipment,
Right,
where they
correct,
have the
yes,
sucker, the
that's
vacuum
correct.
cleaners, and then the street sweepers, right?
Yeah.
And that's where residents always
but-
ask, why can't we go another couple of weeks? Because it's late, and we get that request every year.
Yeah, they have to convert, it's mainly the trucks. They have to take the equipment they're utilizing for leaves and put the plows on them to start plowing snow. So there is kind of they have to kind of set a hard and fast deadline. I know they've extended in years past. A lot of times it depends on if it snows early and we get caught without plows on trucks, then it can create of course, you get snow on top of leaves as well, so.
Snow on trees, on leaves.
Yeah, it's generally like the week after Thanksgiving, and they may go even a week longer to pick up the leaves, but they try and keep it in that time frame, and a lot of times it's just weather depending, and it is absolutely depending on when the leaves fall. If they have to extend it later into the year when the leaves fall later just to be able to pick them up. They can't leave massive piles out there, so.
So you're not allocating any labor charges or personnel charges, you're just allocating the use of our equipment to pick up leaves into this.
Right. Right. The rubbish collection fund has equipment usage for the fall leaf pickup. And then there is a charge for the leaf roll-offs as part of their Tringali costs that we pay to Sacra.
And Tringali usually has yard waste beyond when we do final leaf pickup.
Because they pick up the bags,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
yes.
So-
Yeah, they do the curbside of all. So
That's, yeah.
we do allow, and generally the Tringali may extend the curbside yard waste pickup again. If people end up having to bag some of their leaves,
Yep.
they may do that as well. And then the other option that people have is to take them over to Sacra on Coolidge and drop them off there. There's no charge to do that.
And is that like a regulation requirement that you're allocating the equipment use, our internal equipment use versus personnel use in with this refuse collection? Like, I guess I
Well,
don't understand.
part of the new administrative charges we're charging on behalf of the motor equipment fund does include some of the labor. So there is some labor in there.
So there's some labor in here?
Yes, yes. As
Okay.
part of the administrative charge now, and that was something we did because we ran the motor equipment fund ran into a, I don't remember the deficit, and mainly it was because we had the assets, the way the assets worked versus the depreciated assets worked versus the fund balance, we had to supplement our motor equipment fund. So there is an administrative charge that does involve some labor in for both wages and benefits. There is a labor charge technically in the administrative charges, but the majority of the motor equipment is for the actual charge of the equipment, the use of the equipment, which they track. And there's the Schedule C, they call it, at the state of Michigan, which establishes rates for use of equipment, and we bill that back to the motor pool, so that the motor pool, the whole idea of the internal service fund motor pool is, the hope is you generate enough revenue there to buy and repair your equipment as you continue forward. The equipment owned by the motor pool fund gets replaced. The difficult part is being able to do that, to generate enough revenue to be able to buy your equipment utilizing fund balance in the motor equipment fund. But yes, there is a charge in there that does involve some labor in the refuse collection fund.
Okay.
But I think when the city, I don't know how many years ago it was, when we did go for a Headley override for the rubbish millage, but at the time, had we not had the approval, we would have likely eliminated yard waste curbside pickup, because that cost was about the amount that we needed to offset in expenses. But we're at a point now, we're generating enough revenue to where the services were provided, we don't have to cut, and we don't have to go for a Headley override at this point. So, but if that $102,000 became, an expenditure on the expenditure side where we're going to have Senate, we would have to consider going out for a Headley override of our rubbish millage. But right now, we're good. DDA, the revenues we're estimating around $236,000. We still have our part-time DDA director in that fund, and then the majority of their expenditures is the bond, the recovery zone bond, principal and interest. There are, I have to look at it, I don't remember how many payments are left on that recovery zone bond, but that does take a pretty good chunk of their annual budget each year. And a lot of the remaining goes to her operating supplies and the recommended budget. She asked me to utilize that in operating supplies for their programs, so they have a break-even budgeted this year. And their fund balance is around $112,000, which for them is about a 52.7% reserve. But they will have significantly more flexibility when that recovery zone bond is paid off. Library is, we do have two millages for the library. The rollback on those continues. I have that, let me grab the figure here. I just provided Michelle with the rollback rates that'll be before council on May 7th. The library millage rates are rolling back to 0.8290 and 0.2787 from the original 1 and .3333. So the Headley rollback continues to roll them back as well, so. But that's gonna generate around $558,000 in property tax revenue. She gets annual state aid from the state of Michigan. And also there's money for the local state community stabilization authority, which is from lost personal property tax. And then there's also some interest income on their bank investments. So the anticipated revenue is $629,770. Our expenditure side, we have our 2 full-time employees over there and many part-timers, many that have been around for a lot of years. We have Jenny and Kristen over there as the director and youth librarian, assistant library director. And she did, and their board approved a increase for her part-time employees and a amount of paid leave days and holidays starting in the budget year. They've had a lot of long-term employees that have never had that kind of benefit, so Jenny did budget for that this year coming up, so that some of their long-serving employees could get some additional benefit. What she was finding is in order to make, if they worked a 24-hour week, they were at the point where they may come in when they were sick and risk other people being off, so rather than deal with that, give them a benefit to where if they don't work, they could still get some paid leave. So that is something they put in place. They have an administrative service charge as well, and they also have a charge for the MERS defined benefit retirement portion of the pension. That's one of the funds, Bruce, you mentioned, one of the funds that does pay toward that retirement benefit. She did bump the books and periodicals, which is their lifeline, up to $45,000. And then that $10,000 for the HVAC, I think may come off because they're working on that now. It was also in the current budget year, so if that's not needed, that will be removed. But their expenditures are $635,615. So the fund balance impact is a slight use of fund balance, $15,845. They're going to end this year around 403, which would leave their ending fund balance at 387,644, which is 93.3% of their annual average expenditure. So again, healthy fund balance.
Just again, curious, since their expenditures exceeded their revenues by a small amount, 15, I assume that's kind of a one-time thing, that's not part of a trend?
Yeah. And their board asks each year if, if they need to look at Headley override, but again, they have a healthy fund balance, so, and it's a small use of fund balance, and yeah, I don't expect that it would be something continuing, ongoing, but if it is in a small amount of, $15,000, they have a healthy enough fund balance that they can continue to utilize, that amount for a number of years and not be negatively impacted. The capital projects fund, this was what was set up from the $2.5 million transfer last year for the city. The majority of the infrastructure projects that were done over a 2-year period. I estimated that we'd have around 367 at the end of this fiscal year. And then we did budget an additional 140 for IT as part of the project we mentioned earlier. And the City Hall server is, now that our new IT folks are on, is sorely in need of replacement. So we did put those items. The fire department requested parking lot repairs. That is in there as well for 25. And the side door and flooring replacement at Hunter is in as well. So the budgeted amount is $200,000, which would leave $167,000 at the end of next fiscal year. Our senior citizen housing, our Renshaw Apartments, we have 14 one-bedroom units and 1 efficiency unit in the building. Rents have been frozen. We went back and looked for at least the past 5 years. In years before, there was consistent $10 increase in the monthly rents on an annual basis. In fact, one of the residents there years ago used to come to these budget meetings and say, please don't freeze the rates. We can afford $10 a month. I don't know if any of you knew Tom Glenn, but he was their spokesperson and would always say, you know, we're okay with a $10 a month increase, we can afford it. So, but we recommended this year a $20 increase in the monthly rents, which would increase the rents to $495 a month for the 14 one-bedroom units and to $465 a month for the efficiency. And that would generate, if they're all full and rented, $88,740. And overall, with interest income and a few other small items, would be $98,240. Our budgeted expenditures are $93,000, so we do have a budgeted surplus of $52,40. They're at $409,000 estimated at the end of this fiscal year, so they would have a fund balance of $414,240 at the end of the 24-25 budget year, and this is the one that it's a fund balance reserve of 500%. So,
What percentage of units are rented today?
I think 12, I think there's 2 vacancies right now.
3. There's 3. We haven't got the keys yet, but the third one is vacant now as well.
And what's the age requirement to be in there?
60?
55, I believe.
I think it's 60.
Is it?
I think 60.
And are they relatively easy to rent out? Do they turn over pretty quick, or?
We have a waiting
We
list
do
for
have one,
both
yeah.
Do you?
in the city, of Clausen residents and out of the city as well.
Is there an income requirement, or?
I don't believe we do any background check as far as income requirements.
So I'm surprised the 3 aren't already filled, if there's a waiting list.
We were waiting for them to get cleaned up and ready to rent.
Oh, okay,
So
so
they're
they'll,
recently vacant, and once hasn't been cleaned yet, I don't believe, but
okay, so it's just transitions time, okay.
So they turn over quickly?
yes.
Keeping them filled is no big deal.
I am curious how we ended up over time with a 500% fund balance. Is there some history to that, or?
it's just on an annual basis. I think over time there was a plan of accumulating, whether it be the roof or gutters or siding, to expend it back into the building itself, so,
Okay, so this is kind of a pool of money
yes.
in anticipated of possibly high budget
Yes.
repair items.
In fact, there was a $50,000 in the budget last year for a roof, and it was decided to hold off because it didn't need it yet, so.
Okay.
Moving on to our water and sewer fund, the budgeted increase in water rate was a pass-through, 4.5%. We did get our rate, I think it still has to be approved by the board, but it's 4.5% increase in our water consumption rate. So we're strictly doing pass-through this year. So the water rate will go from 354 to 370 per 100 cubic feet, with the fixed rate going from 1470 to 1536 a quarter. Those amounts are estimated to produce $1,232,000 and $359,000 in water revenue respectively. We have penalties and interest when we have some interest income in the water and sewer fund, and then we do have a line item for water tap fees for new developments. But the total estimated water revenues is $1,725,200. Our sewer revenues, same thing. I went to the rate setting meeting last week. They expect our average cost increase to be at 2.5%, which is good news because I know the sewer has been a lot higher in years past, so that's not bad. The quarterly billing charge going from $21.21 to $21.74 per quarter. The sewer consumption rate is going from $8.90 to $9.156 per 100 cubic feet. And these rates are estimated to generate $504,000 and $3,025,000 respectively. And then the sewer generates also penalties and interest. We do have the IWC going to the customers who generate industrial waste, those charges. And the total budgeted amount for the sewer revenue is $3,687,300. And then we have our debt millage, which is decreasing significantly here over this year because the largest portion of the debt was paid. The GWK debt, let's see, the GWK budgeted to receive $50,000, and the SRF debt is expected to receive $218,000 in revenue through billing. So the total budgeted revenue for our debt millage is $282,900, and all of the revenues combined for water and sewer and debt is $5,695,400. In our water department, we have 4 DPW employees assigned. We have 3 laborers and a full-time water clerk. In addition to the wages and benefit, we do have our water purchases estimated from SACWA at $633,000, and they have a fixed cost component which is $67,950. A large amount of administrative service charges billed to water, which amounts to $168,000. The equipment rental usage, once again, for water and sewer equipment billed through the motor equipment fund is around $108,000. And then we do have pension bond payments through the water and sewer fund as well of $198,370. And then a portion of the bond repayment for our retirees and active employees is in there as well. So the total recommended budget for water is $1,956,000 on the expenditure side. Sewer side, we get billed fixed fees now for our sanitary and our storm flow. Those are the rates that were set last week. And then we have a sewage disposal cost as well. But we budgeted $950,000 for sewer cleaning and televising. That's the program we're moving forward with that we hope will start here before the end of this fiscal year. We put $350,000 in this year, and we're putting the other estimated $950,000 in for next year. And those amounts can be adjusted once that RFP process is followed and we figure out how much that's going to cost. Again, we expect that'll begin sometime in May or June. And then, yeah, I mentioned here the $350,000 that's in the current year. The administrative fees as well, the depreciation and amortization of the system, $118,500 and $250,000 respectively. And then our budgeted expenditures for sewer are $4,926,090. The debt expenditures, again, we expect the GWK debt and the SRF debt to be $44,650. So those are dropping quite a bit. And our budget total expenditures for water and sewer is $6,926,740. So water and sewer is a little bit differently. As an enterprise fund, it doesn't have a fund balance, but it does have a retained earnings. And one of the things I tried to explain before is we utilize working capital for our water and sewer fund as opposed to retained earnings, because most of our retained earnings is in the ground. It's our infrastructure. So, but we do still have a healthy working capital, which is really our current assets minus our current liabilities. Although our retained earnings is $11.6 million, our working capital is nearly $3 million. It'll be close to that at the end of the fiscal year. And we do have $1.2 million of working capital due to the $1.3 million sewer CCTV. So that's pretty much an expenditure of our working capital. But I do anticipate we'll end the year with $1.8 million in working capital, which is about 32% of our annual expenditures. So once again, still a healthy reserve going forward.
So, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'm just saying, so before the CCV, or the closed circuit television cost, we would have been looking at a 60-some% fund balance.
Yes.
So, okay, so, I mean, again, money needs to be used, so I think that's.
And
still
we did apply for the grant to reimburse that cost.
Okay.
we'll see where that goes. I didn't put it in the budget.
Right, yeah.
We hope to get it, and if we
Yes.
do, that will replenish that
Yes.
working capital.
Mr.
account.
Mr. Rager provides a long list of grants he applied for,
Okay.
so.
Is there any plans to set up a lead service line replacement program to start replacing these lead service lines?
We're actually required, it's one of the goals for this year and it's going to go into next year. And that was part of the CDMSI that was approved, and you're going to have, there's much more to that program coming down the pipe to you. So what you originally approved was for AEW to put the bid packet together.
Right.
And so
But I thought that was just for the survey, and not really the replacement.
there is that, and then there's another step in there
Okay.
to actually identify what needs to be replaced. And then we will have to look at how we will fund eventually the actual replacement of those service lines.
All right.
Moving on to our motor equipment fund, this is the one we did have a deficit that we're addressing. We should have sufficient surplus to avoid that in the upcoming audit for the 23-24 budget year. And we do continue to charge that admin fee and the use of the equipment to the fund. So I do have $783,000 budgeted in the 24-25 budget in revenues. And between the use, the lease payments, which they own and reimburse, and then there is a pension bond payment there as well. But I anticipate that we'll end the year in expenditure side at $618,755, which will leave us, this year we'll have a surplus, fund balance of $515,000, with a budgeted surplus of $164,000. We'll have a healthy and hopefully avoid a deficit trigger of $682,436 at the end of next fiscal year. So, in good shape, healthy. I mean, all in all, and the commitment again to try and expend funds where necessary in all of the areas, including supplementing our much-needed infrastructure programs. But I feel we continue to be conservative, but at the same time investing as much as we possibly can into our list of many needs. I think as every municipality faces. So, but any other questions for me on anything?
Last I remember, the taxable value of this city is around 480 million. Has that number changed?
Yeah, we actually are in excess of 500 million now. I believe for L4029 taxable value will be 505 million and change.
Okay.
And that includes our personal property list as well. There's still about 14 million, I think, in personal property assessment. That seems to drop though, because
Could you clarify personal property?
personal property, like businesses' assets, they eliminated up to 40,000 years ago. I think they've extended that even to 80,000. So a business that has 80,000 of assets, they used to pay a personal property tax on those assets.
Okay.
And I think under Snyder's administration years ago, as governor, they started to eliminate that additional tax for businesses.
Okay.
And of course, as cities, we're like, well, are we going to get replacement revenue? And that's where that local community stabilization authority came in. They do reimburse us back. It was 100% in the beginning, but it's probably closer to about 80% now of what we lost, we get back from the state.
Okay.
And then we can run through the capital projects, the 5-year capital. I put it in a list. I'll try and put a little more detail before May 7th, just to get an idea. I know the program that we utilize through Munetrics does allow for a much prettier looking 5-year capital. And I give Kelly credit for creating, one last year. I'm more interested in the numbers and making sure we can meet the requirements of the 5-year capital as much as possible. So But if you have the list, did you all have a copy of the list of this looking thing?
Should be the last 2 pages.
But the 2025 list is the one that's impacted in this budget, that's included. The list on, you can see the 5-year plan for the police equipment is at the top. The Axon bundle, the in-car cameras, the body worn cameras, and the tasers. That was part of the plan quotation that she received. As she had mentioned, the best news about that is we get replacement of equipment as part of this contract without an increase in the cost. So the 71.1 in 2025 is the initial cost year, and then you can see it goes 48.8, 50,750, 52.8, and 54.9 over the 5-year period. But it did include replacement of those within the 5 years. I think they said 3 years.
Well,
Go in
that's-
2027.
That's for technology upgrades, not for vandalism or damage or
Right.
anything. That would be an additional cost, just to be honest about it, right?
Yeah.
That's
Well, that's the
that's the system.
block.
Yeah,
That's
you're
the
Oh,
talking
sorry,
about,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
This is for these are,
Body in.
yeah,
Yeah,
this is
sorry,
going to
you
be,
said that.
yeah, the upgrade to the actual software of these is included and the replacement of them as
Which
well.
is great, because we don't have that.
Right. And then going down the list, the body armor is their bulletproof vests. That money could be recouped via a grant that they submit for, so there's an opportunity. We usually have a shared cost on that, so the chief said 6,000 would be good for the budget for that. We have that, the building reconfiguration security in there. That also includes security for the other buildings as well, as part of that figure. Going out, we have the aerial truck, which we're obviously not gonna have a $2 million windfall, but I talked to the chief today. He does hope, if any grants are available, you know, over the next 2-3 years, he's got his eye out. If there's any way we can get any portion of funding. The one thing they continue to do is if you are able to pay for it up front, they'll generally give you a discount. So even if we borrow the money, we might be able to get an upfront discount. But he's looking at the possibility of grants over the next few years, but we got it in 2028, so.
And to make sure that's not a helicopter, right?
Or the submarine.
Okay.
That is just his aerial ladder truck. It's not sneaking in any cover crafts or helicopters. And then their SCBA, same thing, we've got 120 in there. He's submitted for grants, so there's a possibility that that cost could be recouped through grants, but that's the cost for now, since we don't know if we're gonna get it. Those are the mobile data computers for the police vehicles. She needed 2. Actually that's all. I think the 2 there is actually a rating. I'll have to double check that. Where it lists a 1, 1, and a 2. I think that's some form of rating that I'll have to look at. But she did need to replace mobile data computers in the vehicles, number of vehicles. And then her office computers, $10,000. Parking lot improvements is the fire that we mentioned earlier in their budget. And then the patrol vehicle equipment that's to equip the lease vehicles. At this point, those are all for Tahoes. As she mentioned, before they end the lease on Explorers, if they make them available, they may do Explorers, and this replacement cost would be less because they can take the existing equipment in the Explorers and move that into the new vehicle. So if not, this is worst case scenario. This is where they have to, I guess, depending on whether you're a Chevy or Ford fan, it might be best case scenario. But these are for the Tahoes. And then the IT, as you go down for the capital projects fund 401, that's the IT and audio visual. And then the Hunter side door and flooring repairs, the 35 that was in the budget. And then I do have in water and sewer, the CCTV, the battered water main, 413, that's our portion of the cost in the water and sewer fund. and the total for the budget year 2025 is $2,184,265. And that does tie out through the budget, between the budget funds themselves and then the 401 fund, they're all in there. And going forward, and we have to call that a wish list, but the reality is, these are all needs and replacements. There may be financing options. We're going to keep looking at grant options if they're out there, and then prepayment incentives if they're there.
Okay. Just a quick question on the CCTV cost. I recall it being estimated at 1.3 million total. I'm looking at 950,000 there. Where's the difference at?
The 350 is in the current budget. That was one of the budget amendments the council approved.
Okay, so that was right out the gate. This is the rest of it.
Yeah,
Okay.
we put that in when we asked for the additional DPW employees. We put 350 in the current year.
Okay.
Shouldn't streets and sewer repairs be in here as well?
As part of the infrastructure. Oh,
It's a
actually,
capital improvement plan.
well, no, now for major and local streets, it's considered maintenance, so we don't put it in the capital, if that's what you're talking about. The major and local street monies are not going in here because they're part of our maintenance in that budget. They don't go in the capital.
Other municipalities
Mhm.
put them in their capital improvement
Okay,
plans.
I can put them in there, but since they're considered maintenance, I don't consider them capital, but.
Well, I'm talking about replacement, not just repairs. I mean, I guess I'm looking for our street repair plan.
Okay, well, that'll be, once the decision's made on the bonding, you will get a very comprehensive list of what we hope to do.
It'll be predictable because you'll have a revenue stream to make the prioritizations and designate what you're going to do.
Yeah, the list they have now has 68 of them?
So I think 67 or 65?
65, it's 65. 65 million worth of road, water main, and it didn't include sewer, but road and water main replacement of roads was just under 65 million. I think. 64, but yeah, you will absolutely get that list. Once the decision's made of what we're gonna do, then we'll put together a list of at least what our ideal scenarios would be to replace all of our sewer. The sewer is going to be the one that's determined by what's going on now, or what's going to happen, and that's going to be top priority. So engineers are estimating 10 million worth of sewer work. If it ends up being 10 million, then that would come off the top if we bonded, and in any one of the scenarios, 10 million would come off the top, and then the rest would go toward other infrastructures.
Anyone have any questions regarding this topic? Mr. Aker.
So if I can, I'll go over the questions that council would like more information on. So we'll provide the percentage of residents and business commercial, the revenue generated from the percentage of revenue of residents versus business/commercial. We will move the 4th of July to the City Hall expenses. We will provide within accounting the breakdown of professional services. We will inquire where the $12,000 plot is located in the police budget. We will provide the 40,000 part-time salaries to 80,000. Why the senior center? Why that occurred in the senior center? We'll get the answer on that. We will coordinate RepPro software demonstration to council. I will provide the maps for major roads and local roads. I'll also provide the maps of the locations where miscellaneous concrete has occurred and will occur. And then we will also provide the taxable valuation of the city properties. I mean, of the city Clausen properties. Is there anything that I don't think I missed anything?
Okay, and I would like to propose we take a 5-minute break before we move on to the next item, because we've just taken in a lot of info. It was really good, great presentation, Mr. Pollock and Mr. Aker. Thank you to you and all of your team for putting together a nice, concise look at where we're gonna spend money for the upcoming year. And if someone, I would like to make a motion that we take a 5-minute break.
Don't we have a motion about accepting the draft, and so we need to
Receive and file
vote?
it.
Pardon?
To
Yeah.
receive and file it.
Yeah, so we need to vote on that, right? Because we have a motion on the table for that, and then my follow-up question is, if we receive and file it, then do we need the second meeting that we have scheduled for?
Well, if council is comfortable with me providing the information for the questions that you've asked, what we'll do is I'll provide that information to you. We will then provide the additional accoutrements of the budget, which are the pie charts and the wire diagrams and whatnot, and you'll get this, suitable for presentation for May 7th, if that is your desire.
Well, we had 2 more meetings scheduled, one for Thursday, 2
Yeah.
days from now, and one for next Tuesday.
That's what I wanted to understand, if we were gonna
Right.
do it in that meeting, or
No, there would, if you're comfortable receiving just the information I'll provide it to you in email, all the information that needs to be provided to answer your questions. That doesn't substantively change this document really too much.
Right.
We're just going to add the other additional supporting documents to it, and then that would be what would be voted on at May 7th meeting. So, as I mentioned before, once council is comfortable with the information that's been presented, it's your direction whether or not you want to proceed with those work
so
sessions or not.
theoretically, we could wrap everything up on May 7th and not need the other 2 scheduled meetings.
That is correct. And we have, unfortunately, 2 of us will not be available this Thursday. That just happened.
So we won't have the meeting anyhow.
Well, Thursday, but you can have it the 30th if it's necessary.
So if we vote yes on the motion to receive and file, then does that, by its very nature, negate the need for these other meetings, and we just know that we
I would ask that you vote to cancel, so it's.
subsequently, so we'll vote on the receive and file, and then vote to cancel, and then we can move on to taking a break.
Yeah.
So we're ready.
So we have the motion on the table, or the motion is to receive and file.
Yes, sir.
So, I'm just thinking out loud whether or not we need to have an amendment to say that we're going to bypass any other future meetings that have been scheduled.
Do you want to do it that way or do a separate motion? Doesn't matter.
Okay. So, I'll make a motion to amend the motion on the floor, which is to not have any of the scheduled meetings for the budget review.
Support.
And receive the file.
And receive the file. Of course.
Roll call, Michelle, please.
Wait, was there support for that?
Yes, Anderson.
Honestly, I think next Tuesday's meeting would be a good idea. I don't know if Thursday's gonna really bring anything more in light, but in case there are more questions before we
Receive the file.
vote on the budget, it'll give them time to answer some of these questions, and then we can ask any more, but that's my thought.
So in years past, what we've done as well is made ourselves available to, if you want to meet and go over anything specifically, we can do that as well.
You mentioned pie charts and all kinds of other fancy stuff. Would we get that on May 7th to continue
You
the
would get-
discussion? Because it doesn't have to file till the second meeting in May, correct? Like, that's when we would be done with it.
Well, the consent, the understanding that I have from council is that you would go to approve it on May 7th. So we've scheduled for the public hearing on May 7th, and then we would vote on the budget on May 7th.
So if there's additional material that you think would be beneficial, said these pie charts you mentioned and whatnot, then that might lend credence to having one more meeting next Tuesday to get,
I don't know if those things would be.
Well, it's just, it pretties up the budget more than anything.
It's illustrations of the
Yeah.
information.
Yeah, it's, the final budget usually has some charts and other things in it to go along with the narrative, which I'll provide in the final budget document to you, but it won't have any like new information. It'll just show, like for example, the general fund by department in a pie chart. It'll show you what percentage of each department encompasses the 100% of the pie.
So I guess that I'm hearing that if we have one more meeting, then we get a chance to look at the final draft before it has to be finalized at the May meeting. And that, I guess I don't disagree with that.
Do you think those, I don't necessarily think those supporting documents will be done by, by Tuesday.
So if they're not done by Tuesday, that means, all right, so then we're gonna look at it on the 7th, and what if there's something that we're like, this can't be in the final document, but
I highly doubt that'll be the
you never
case.
know, you know?
I doubt, in this case, I think I kind of did.
I guess we need to make sure that we have the ability to make corrections where corrections are necessary. And that's,
If there was at the 7th meeting, if there was some great discovery, we could make amendment to it right there if necessary. You will receive that's a Tuesday the 7th, you'll receive the information on Thursday, that'd be the 5th, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. I don't know what Thursday that is, it's I think May 2nd.
the second, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so you'll receive the information May 2nd. If there is if there's anything glaring, I would imagine it would be brought to my attention pretty quickly, but I don't think that's going to be necessarily the case. But you can bring it to our attention, we can address it, and then you can act on it on May 7th as well.
So on May 7th, we have the opportunity to, like we do with some of the documents that we get the first and second readings kind of thing, to say we accept it with the amendment to page 42 should be blue instead of green or something like that, and then that's how it would be finalized.
You could, I mean,
Yeah. We're filing a draft, right? The
Yes.
final you'll present, we'll have a few days to look at it. Since our questions so far have not been of a real substantive nature, I think we can.
Yeah, the biggest change from what you received from April 2nd was basically the draft on the fund balance. That was basically the biggest significant change.
So,
We'll wait for the mayor to
Yeah.
come back.
Didn't sign it.
Sounds like she's fighting what's going around.
Okay, what I miss?
Coming over and cleaning everyone's house, that's what we decided.
Sign me up. Okay, I think we have a motion on the floor, right? Amendment to the motion. Michelle, would you please read it for me?
The amendment to the original motion is to cancel the additional meetings and accept the receive and file the draft budget. Trying to think of the word.
Yep, and I support it.
Okay, so we're ready for roll call, please?
Mayor Milan.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Moffett.
Yes.
Councilmember Shepherd.
yes.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Binkowski.
No.
And then a vote on the original motion.
Okay, so we have agreed to.
That was the amendment, so
Oh,
now
sorry.
we'll vote on the original motion as amended. Mayor Pro Tem Moffett.
Yes.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Binkowski.
No.
Mayor Milan.
Yes. And now we've agreed to receive and file our budget for the upcoming year and cancel the meetings that were scheduled for this coming Thursday and the following Tuesday.
Madam Mayor, I move that we suspend for 10 minutes. No, that's not the right word, is it?
Recess.
Recess, thank you. For 5 minutes.
How many minutes?
Said 5. See what I meant that to this one?
Support.
Yeah, I meant that's,
Roll call, please, Michelle.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Binkowski.
Yes.
Mayor Milan.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Moffett.
Yes. Thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute break.
Couldn't think of the book.
Thank you. Okay, thank you everyone for indulging our short break. We're back and we're going to discuss our agenda item 6C, which is consideration of hosting discussion on potential bond ballot language.
Madam Mayor, I move to host discussion on potential bond ballot language.
Support.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the April 16, 2024 regular city council meeting, the administration was directed to develop potential bond language for council's future consideration. Below is draft bond language below is draft bond ballot proposal language for your consideration. In addition to the stated language below would be your consideration of the various millage options that were briefed by PFM at the last council meeting. It is anticipated that we will host discussion on this issue, potentially at each regular council meeting, with the proposed goal of having approved language by the June 18th city council meeting. Coming to a consensus on the language provided would be an ideal outcome for this evening, with the understanding that greater granularity of the financial impact to residents on each of the millage options needs to be generated. So the language that you have in front of you, minus the millage options, and then also getting greater clarification on the not to exceed years, we'll get more supporting information on that. But the language to authorize the city to levy these millages to collect a certain amount of dollars over a certain amount of time for the language provided within. We had one question that we sent to Pat McGow, who is the bond counsel, in regards to clarification for the use for parking lots. We have the city municipal parking lots that are in need of assistance too, and whether or not the kind of blanket of municipal facilities, does that cover that usage or not? I'm awaiting his response. So if anything, we would possibly add municipal parking lots there as a list item, but if depending his advisement. So the discussion, having some discussion and maybe coming to consensus on what's here would be hopefully an ideal outcome for tonight.
Would someone like to read this so that people out there that are listening know what we have?
I can do it.
Talk about? That'd be awesome, thank you.
So this would be on the ballot, particularly for the voters of Clawson's consideration. It would be titled Infrastructure and Municipal Facilities Bond Proposal. And it'll say, shall the city of Clawson, Michigan borrow the sum of not to exceed, insert the total dollar amount, and issue its general obligation unlimited tax bonds and one or more series payable in not to exceed 25 years from the date of issuance for the purpose of paying all or part of the cost to acquire, construct, reconstruct, improve infrastructure and municipal facilities of the city, including road and street improvements, water main replacements and improvements, sanitary sewer improvements, storm sewer improvements, and municipal facility improvements, including city hall improvements and construction, furnishing and equipping of and or rehabilitating and renovation to a community center, together with all related site improvements. The estimated millage to be levied in 2025 would be determined, and then it would be a dollar per 1,000 of taxable value, and the estimated simple average annual millage rate required to retire the bonds, and have an example there as well, depending on what millage rate would be decided upon by council.
Okay, so, I'll just get, my initial thought is, we're going out and requesting from our residents something that they all know that we need, and they all want, and it's gonna be a hard sell for some, and if we don't do it, we're just not gonna get it done, so therefore we're gonna do it. For others, I think people care about roads and sewers. I think if we throw in here municipal facility improvements, including city hall improvements, we're gonna lose people. That is my gut on that. Not that it's not important, it is important, but I think it's just, I think of the school situation, and many people were a little bit jaded about that, even though they were clear in what they said. I don't want to imply that they were not, but after the fact, when people go back and look at the details and realize what details they actually agreed to, I don't want to be in the same situation that they were in. And as I said, that's just my first impression, and I don't want to do anything to make us have to do this more than once. I think it's going to be a hard sell. I think it's essential for our community, but I think we need to be really strict on what we're doing and have clear lines about what we're doing and not offer any gray. Because the minute we offer gray, we're talking people out of it. That's mine.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, and especially we know that we have this huge ticket, $175 million, just to do the roads, not all that other stuff, and that's why we've always said it's such a big ticket item, we need to do something else. Throwing all this other stuff in here, it takes away from the goal of doing the roads and eating that $175 million elephant. I mean, I would go even further than what Mayor Milan said and say that I would not even support including the municipal facilities and all that other stuff. I think we said we were going to do this just for the roads, and I think we need to stick to just the roads and take all that other stuff up some other way, some other how. But the roads have been so ignored for so long that I agree 100%.
And I like that you're looking to all of the issues. Like, I appreciate that you're being thoughtful for the future, for all of the things that you manage, that we manage. But I really think we have to stay specific on this. I feel like it's really critical.
So you're saying, as far as, just so I understand what the general thought is, that we are not including sanitary sewer improvements, or we are for stormwater?
It sounds like the pushback is in regards to the municipal facilities. And-
Okay.
And just for clarification on that it would be Hunter. Hunter's the big issue there. And so whether or not, we have to crack the code on that at some point in time, whether it's at that location or here. If it's not the council's pleasure to have that ability to be flexible on this, then so be it. And maybe we tackle that in a separate building altogether, possibly.
And then if we were to do that as a separate millage, doesn't that make sense? Doesn't it make sense that you garner people's heartstrings for community services, right?
Or included in a recreation?
Yes, something that.
We did one for the parks, it's coming on 10 years close to.
Or even show that we did such a great job with that money you gave us for the roads, then we can
Focus.
We can say, hey, look, we were prudent, we did a good job with that, give us some more money, and we'll be even better with that money for this other stuff. But you had something to say.
No, I just wanted to agree with their comments that I think this needs to be focused on road and street improvements, sewer improvements, and water main improvements, and leave out the facilities improvements altogether.
And so, I was just saying, what is the projected date? Is this in August, or is this for?
That's still, the plan would be for November, but I know council's your pleasure if you want to try.
It's a completely different electorate, between August and November.
What's on the August ballot?
Presidential?
It's a
Primary.
Oh,
Primary.
All the other seats outside of president.
And then for transparency, right? Like, we've heard criticism of people holding elections at off times, so that that you can target an audience and educate people you want out. And I would like us to do this. I would love for us to be able to do this so well that we get an overwhelming sign of support that we can take care of this and then move on to the other things that we need to do as well. Because I would love for us to do all of this at one time, but I just don't think the feeling would let it happen. I just don't think so. I think it's too broad, and I don't know. If we've been promising one thing, we need to stick to one thing for a minute.
If we do it really well, really transparently, then we set the stage for asking again, like, we improve our credibility if we go about it as honestly and forthright as possible.
Yeah, I basically agree with everything as far as the content. Yeah, we need to kind of narrow the focus a bit. Everything that we've brought about municipal facility, those are all very important things. I'm glad you got the big picture view of it. But I agree, this is like the big piece we have to bite off first, and then we work our way into Hunter and City Hall and things like that.
Could we do both at the same time? We do one for roads and then one for facilities?
If we
Do you
did
think
the
it
fac-
would
I guess you could, I mean,
undermine
Well,
one or the
I
other?
think the facility thing, we need to kind of think that through a little further.
I agree.
it definitely needs vetting. This is just a potential
Yeah.
funding mechanism for
Sure.
it, so. Because that problem exists and it needs to be addressed. And so I think Councilman Shepherd, you made mention one time, like, it can't just be a one-trick pony in regards to Hunter. So, I mean, that's why
That's
putting
all.
it in there. And that's a possibility, whether it's the renovation of Hunter, whether it's the migration of Hunter and services here in some fashion. But if that's not the appetite of council, so be it.
Well, if you're talking potentially migration of services of Hunter here, then that would involve proposals of what we could do with that property, right? And
Exactly.
then that would change the look of whatever we
Yeah.
do. And I think from a resident standpoint, that is something we would all look forward to seeing, and then see how much extra we would have to go in excess of whatever, say,
Yeah.
we could get for a sale of that area with new development. But
I agree. That's a whole nother discussion, I think, for another time. I think we all need to dig deeper into that. But I think as far as the basic infrastructure, the roads, sewers, and mains, I think they've been discussed very well. I think DPW and AEW did an excellent presentation. I think we kind of got our heads wrapped around that and can proceed with that. And then just kind of focus. I'm just looking at the verbiage. I think pretty well end with storm sewer improvements.
So I just about that.
Yep.
And
Sorry.
And then the words and municipal facilities, that can pretty much come out until you get down to the meat and potatoes of the millage numbers.
And that also gives us the opportunity to start we've heard noise from the community in the past couple of years about the roads and that sort of stuff. It gives us opportunity to, over whatever the stretch is, if we were to look for something else, to start the conversation, get people talking about it, get people interested in doing something like that. Right now, all I hear everywhere I go, I take my dog for a walk and people stop and when are they gonna fix the roads, so it's true. So, yeah, I think we really need to show that we're listening to that and focus just on that right now.
Yeah, I just want to make sure Hunter is not off the table.
No,
just
not at
what
all.
it is.
It's
just not part of
It's
this.
very, I think it's
a
really
different
important.
table. That's
Yeah.
what we're getting at.
Exactly.
I mean, we want to offer full services
Yep.
for people, right? We want
Yep.
them to be able to get to Hunter without having a tire break or whatever. We need to just plan it a little.
Yeah, and I think it's more than that, because we're gonna see what needs are gonna happen as a result of Shalom and Baker no longer being here.
Yeah.
And what that might encompass as far as what we need to address for
Yeah, we might not want to get rid of that facility. Like, we might have to bite the bullet and
where they may be
do the
other needs
repairs
in the
because-
park.
Yeah.
Right. So, it just, again, as far as when we go into, if it's August, that'd be great. But if we do it November, it's gonna get lost in the noise of November.
I mean, I think I came here and I said a November election all along, just because that gets the greatest participation, and I'm a firm believer. You go through the democratic process to get something on the ballot, it's a matter of how you want to participate. It's not a matter of somebody, did it on purpose to deceive anybody. No, it's out there, you just didn't pay attention, or you didn't read, or you were uninformed, I can't help you. But definitely, there's gonna be a lot of action on the November ballot, and I think that can be to our advantage, to depend on how, we approach this, and outside of just simply providing facts, the creation of potential committee to foster the advocacy for its support.
What constraints are there for us to support this?
I would actually think that I will ask the city attorney at a later date potentially to give us some, basically hey, this is how you can and cannot.
Yeah, I thought that.
I mean, just like we had for the, was it the Headley rollback that was on when I first got here? It was facts-based, but beyond that, just like the school did, we have a committee of volunteers, and it can be administrative and also elected officials and other stakeholders in the community that want to participate. But I think should we graduate to that point and get it on the ballot, we'll have a presentation from the city attorney as to like how it should all operate.
Sounds good.
I was just going to follow up that the optics of us waiting for November, I think it's just better for us to, like, we're not trying to sneak anything in, and we're going to be in the most popular election, and we're going to be out there and vocal, and, yeah.
And we wouldn't be able to proceed with projects if it were approved in August. We'd be pretty constrained because of the scheduling of projects at that point. We might get a small one in, right?
Yeah. We would,
We got 3 months, that's it.
Yeah, we wouldn't have a
I
lot.
mean, you'd ruin your son.
You'd still have to, work on contracts and.
Yes.
Right, that's what I'm
bids
saying, like,
come
we're not
in.
really putting ourselves any further behind.
Okay. So, my concern with November is that we have to simplify the language so that, just for practical purposes of having everything that's going to be on that ballot, that it's going to be part of maybe a backside of the ballot, right?
Definitely on the
Yeah.
back.
Absolutely.
So,
Back
please
top.
turn over and, at the bottom,
It's gonna be
right?
at the bottom on the back.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this, so people are aware,
For
so.
all the college boards and all that.
Yeah, that's the region, so
People
it should be
checked out.
on.
People aren't checked out.
So getting down to the I'm sorry, can we move on to the specifics of the language of the millage?
Well, I garner the consensus is that we are going to strike all the facility language.
Yeah.
And we can make that more formal. If you'd like to, that was the consensus I was looking for from today's meeting. If you'd like to.
Oh, you don't want to go any further?
I'm okay if you wanted to have a light discussion, maybe limited if you'd like to.
Just a
I'll
rubber
keep
tag.
it this light. You got it, you got fill in the blanks, right?
Yeah.
One of them was, okay, you want to borrow 45 million, it drives a certain millage, right? Here's my concern, the estimated millage to be levied in 2025 is X, okay? And then that gives you how much per thousand taxable value, which is pretty much just moving a decimal point. And the estimated simple average annual millage required to the bonds is that I don't know that people are going to be able to sink their teeth into this verbiage per se by itself. For example, I'll just say, you want, let's take scenario number one, the $45 million scenario. So if we pick $45 million as the amount, the estimated millage levied in 2025 would be 4.9, okay?
It's actually lower than that, because the language itself, there are legal requirements for the language that can't be changed, and part of what you're saying would be confusing is required. But the actual millage rates that are gonna be on there are gonna be lower because it's just for the bonds, the series of bonds that we're issuing. So it will be low, it won't be 4.9, it will actually be probably closer to, yeah, they're actually in here, and in their presentation, the.
It's in page 8. where
Yeah, the
shows
46, the actual first year millage is 1.61, and the actual average millage is 3.75.
What page is that
That's 11.
of her presentation?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they give the examples of what the first year levy would be and then what the average would be, which would fill in on that language.
You don't have a copy of it there, the presentation.
Okay, sorry,
It's
I
in your
Yeah,
packet.
it's in the board pack.
Yeah.
So-
Which I took only certain elements of.
So you said 3.075?
375, and that's for the additional. See what, and I think, again, we can be transparent with the residents and tell them the overall levy is what we're shooting for on the $46 million example would be 4.9, which is what it was in 2023 in total. That includes the existing debt we're paying now.
Right.
So the additional rate that's on the language would be, in that case, would be 1.61 would be the levy in the first year. So in 2025, the additional debt levy would be 1.61 added to what we're retiring.
Okay.
So, and
For a
that's
total
because
of 4.9.
for average, it won't say 4.9 on there because it's just for this debt. That's what we have to be clear with people. is the
Okay, well,
language is
I'll
not
be
gonna
honest with you,
say
the
4.9.
clarity in terms of financials is actually a little unclear to the average voter.
Right, and
So I'm looking
that's
at
the
this.
part, and I agree with Sue on that, because the point, we want people to know if there's no debt additional bonds sold, your debt millage is gonna be gone in 2033.
Exactly, yeah.
If we issue bonds in series for $46 million, the amount of total debt millage you're gonna pay over the next, I think it's 8 to 10 years, is 4.9. That's gonna be the average you're gonna pay. That includes the existing debt we have
Yeah,
now.
that's, this.
Yeah, for the new debt, it's gonna be 1.61 in the first year.
Yeah.
And the average over the life is gonna be 375. That's what's gonna be in the language.
And it has to be the language, the incremental increase of the millage versus the debt that's retiring.
Yes.
Okay.
What we can be clear with everybody on is your total average, and that's what they tried to display to people, is that if we do 46 million, 4.9 is what we levied last year. That's what we were trying to get and again, I understand your point too, Sue, about it's not really a zero. It's zero additional based on the debt levy that we had last year and what this additional debt.
It's like when you go to Kohl's and you say, oh, and they tell you, oh, you saved $125 by spending all this money. It's not
Right,
really.
It's trying to make it clear that this would be what you would pay, you pay, in 2023, the debt millage was 4.9. If we bond for 46 million in 4 series, your debt millage total is gonna be 4.9 going forward.
Yes.
But it includes, what they have to put in the language is that the additional debt is gonna levy 1.61 in the first year, and it's gonna average 3.75 over the life of the bond.
So
Exactly. It's the blue laying on the gray.
Yes, exactly.
Here's my point. The average voter, when they look at this, they're gonna say, what's this gonna cost me?
yeah.
So I know I've seen other ballot language that the change in tax will be X amount for an average household.
I
So
think-
that's what they need, we need to tell them, this will result in no increased tax for the average household, which is Plan 1. Or if you go for your 2 point, it's gonna be about $180 per household. And if, or I'm sorry, wouldn't you do that? If you go for the, go to 6 mil, I'm sorry, the 6 mil extended, we'll do the average household about $90 a year. And if you want to go for the gold plan, which is adding 2 mils, so we're running like what, 6, anyway,
6.9.
then it's about 180 per household per year.
But what you're talking about is what we're gonna say in advertising. The language here is the legally required language, and we don't have any, we can't put any
I've seen,
fluff on it.
I've seen the fluff many times. I voted with
I agree,
the
I
fluff.
wrote down a question to ask.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, and the thing is, PFM has a spreadsheet that they'll make available that people can log into, and you can put in your taxable value, and it will give you an estimated cost for
oh yeah,
for
oh,
the
yeah.
debt.
It's
So,
simple math.
Yeah.
But most people aren't gonna go do the math. They're not gonna plug into a spreadsheet. I saw that, I guess it's all good stuff. When the voter gets to here in November, you can say, oh, good, finally, we're gonna do some of that infrastructure. They wanna borrow some money. What's this gonna cost me? And so the fluff I'm referring to, I've seen that fluff many times.
You mean
And
the
maybe-
exam, I mean.
That's not, I'm gonna say it's fluff, it's like an explanation.
Yes, it's
What's the
relatable.
effect
Yeah,
on my
$200,000
bottom line?
home is this,
Yeah.
$300,000 home is
Yeah,
this.
and we
But
can just
that's
take
not
an
on the
average.
ballot.
No, you can't.
No,
You can't put that on the
I've
board
seen it.
ballot.
I've seen it on the ballots.
I'll look
An
into it.
average, they may allow you like to do an average, like an average taxable value for a home in Clawson is X, which would cost, this
You
bond
could-
proposal would cost.
If that's what you gotta do, yeah.
If not, then it could probably, well,
Yeah.
if,
Like
we can
this-
put it on the wall. You know how they post the ballots on the wall and people go there and read them as they walk in? So if there were examples there, then it might get a few people.
Right, back in
If we can.
1990, I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt that.
Per $1,000 of taxable value is how we phrase it usually, right?
Yeah.
That's the way that, we're allowed to offer the language in the actual ballot. There's some limitations, I think.
Yes.
Councilmember Scribe.
I just remember when I voted for that 20-year.
Bruce, we're trying to tell you, remember incorrectly.
I remember it like it was yesterday. That was 20 years ago. Basically, it said, this will result in a tax increase to the average, and I forget how the average, median, you name it, of X number of dollars. I looked at that number, and it was something in the 400 something dollars. I'm like, I'm willing to do that. And I said, I voted yes.
I'll look into it, Council.
But
Forgotten revenue.
But the point I took from your diatribe was, the point I took was, I think that there's But, and thinking back to even the presentation they did last week, I don't know that the average person even understands their taxable value, which is a percentage of the actual value of their home. So I think it's an opportunity to, in the communications that we're doing and all this information that we're gonna put out between now and November, to educate people that what your taxable value really is, because it's significantly less than the value of your home. And so people need to understand just that math formula is what we're multiplying at times to get the net result. And
I would agree, that's a good idea.
and that's
To
part of the
prepare
whole
people.
education that, so, because ideally, not that it happens, but ideally, when people go into the, there's not a booth anymore, but remember the booth when you, anyhow. When people go into the booth, they know, and we don't have to take that opportunity to educate them. They have all the information about how they're gonna vote because we've done a whole explanation prior to going in so that there's just the facts.
I agree that's an ideal situation, but many voters are gonna go in there and they're just gonna kind of look, this is the moment of truth, right? They will not educate themselves, I hate to say it, but to that
Well,
level.
some of us don't like math, let's just be honest, and some of us, this is gonna be our due diligence from the beginning, is to ensure that we present this in a way that what we're gonna do and how we're gonna do it is far more important than the small amount that people are gonna be paying as an increase.
Yeah.
Even though a small amount I will not minimize is a great amount for some people, right? We just have to make it clear that what we're doing is for the benefit of all of us, and it's essential. It's not something we can put off anymore, and it's not gonna get cheaper the longer we wait to do it. So if it doesn't go through this time, we have to start over again.
It's not,
Yes.
it's not if we, what I would ask all of you to consider as you socialize things through your circles, start having a conversation about what is palatable, because we've done that in all but one, because they own multiple homes, said, I don't care what it is, they're gonna support it. So it's not so much, it's a matter of supporting a millage or not so much the granularity of like, is it 4.9, is it 6.0, is it 6.9? So have those conversations, please, with people to see where they're at, if it's that, you know, so, because that will, I would imagine, drive where we're gonna land as far as any mill rate. The feedback that I've gotten thus far, I mean, people are just excited that, all right, finally we're starting to get out of the gates.
So the process of the ballot language,
Yes.
once we finalize it, it goes where next?
And Michelle, can you have
Well,
any?
I'm researching that right now. It's been a while since we've done one, and I asked, I don't know, I didn't email the bond council, I don't know if you did today, Mark, but I was gonna find out, the way I understand it is the bond language has to be certified at the council level, certified to the clerk, who then sends it to the county by the deadline. So that's how I know it's been done. I don't know of any other process, but, you know, being the presidential, you know, general election, we want to make sure that it doesn't require to go to a higher level because it's that ballot. But there's other communities and other things that have been placed on the ballot in years past on a November ballot. You know, we've seen the marijuana questions pop up on there for statewide. We've seen many questions go on there, so there's no reason why a city can't put a question on a November ballot. I know that it will be long if you look at the past ballots. It is usually a two-pager. And I said, hopefully we don't, or, you know, front and back, hopefully it doesn't go to two ballot. There have been communities that have had two ballots, so it's not unheard of. But hopefully, you know, that's not the case for this. I mean, our question would be one small section of the end of the ballot. Cities are last. You know, you go down the line, so the city would be on the back side under the city portion, so.
It's just the unit of government, so it's only you.
Yeah.
But as far as the process beyond, once we approve it, it goes to the county.
It's a certified
Is there any other ballot language that goes through review? So, sorry, the way you've worded it doesn't work.
Well, you have a bond council that puts the language together. You have your attorneys drawing up. The lay people aren't drawing the language up. It does have a certain guideline, and that's why you have them doing it, for that reason.
And they can't for any reason go, nope, you can't have it on this election, can they?
No,
believe so.
they won't say. I mean, so long as we satisfy the timelines, they will not be able to.
Okay, do we have any other
That was
discussion?
Productive, so what I'll do at the next meeting is have the examples of plugging in those numbers and how the information we'll read, and then also I'll look into the example, and if we can provide one to put that additional information there.
And no, does anyone have anything else? Do we want, we have no public to visit us for public comments.
There's one guy back there.
Yeah, there's one.
Would anyone here like to speak on public comment? Okay, nobody would like to speak on public comment, so I don't know, I have the agenda in front of me. Does anyone have any council comments, or anyone else have any?
The next thing is adjournment.
Yes, I thought so.
My
I've really been it.
diatribe is concluded.
Mine wasn't, but apparently it is.
I had a motion.
Support.
Roll call, Michelle, please.
Councilmember Binkowski?
Yes.
Mayor Milan?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Moffett?
Yes.
Councilmember Shepherd?
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
Okay, thanks everyone, and to